American Comics. My Warhammer Simulator Chapter 381-400. From atop the magnificent structure of the upper hive, anti-aircraft missiles rapidly ascended. They traced visible contrails as they relentlessly pursued the gleaming, golden-shelled hovercraft. Iron Man David, piloting the hovercraft, abruptly veered in midair. Employing flight maneuvers that would be impossible for ordinary mortals, it nimbly evaded the incoming anti-aircraft missiles. However, within the hovercraft's interior, aside from Rock, clad in his six-armed Iron Rider armor, who remained impassive. The faces of veteran Hassan and the Psyker Lucy underwent rapid transformations, as if they were on the verge of complete collapse. Despite their discomfort, both remained silent, striving not to burden Rock and the others. Boom, boom, boom. At that moment, the anti-aircraft missiles, due to the hovercraft's constant maneuvering, collided with each other, erupting in dazzling bursts of explosive light. Iron Man David seized the opportunity, while the ground-based defense turrets adjusted their firing angles. He plunged the hovercraft downwards, aiming for the buildings below. This maneuver was intended to evade the imminent aerial barrage. In an instant, the hovercraft, its golden shell constantly flashing, seemed to dive to its absolute limit. Without hesitation, Iron Man David chose to crash head-on into the opulent exterior of a towering structure. Crackle, crackle. Accompanied by the shattering of windows and the scattering of colorful glass, a tremendous crash echoed. The hovercraft, showing no signs of deceleration, scraped along the smooth floor. It careened into the building's spacious interior. Unexpectedly, the building appeared to be hosting some form of prayer gathering. Hive nobles, adorned in lavish attire and exquisite makeup, scattered in panic, seeking refuge. They cleared a path for the hovercraft, which was gradually losing momentum. Screech, screech. Soon after, the hovercraft, its golden shell marred by unsightly scratches, came to a halt before a towering, 10-meter-high statue of the Emperor. This abrupt arrival startled an elderly cardinal bishop, who had been delivering a sermon from the podium, causing him to collapse onto the floor in alarm. He didn't even notice his white mitre falling to the ground. Creak! With the sound of twisting and tearing metal, one of the hovercraft's doors was flung outwards. The door crashed onto the ground, instantly eliciting gasps of surprise from the surrounding nobles. The next moment, Rock, clad in green, six-armed Iron Rider armor, steadied himself against the hovercraft's mangled doorframe, revealing his towering figure. His appearance ignited a flurry of excited chatter among the hive nobles. "Ah, it's an angel of the Emperor, shish. Look at the markings on his armor. He might be a heretic. Where are the Inquisitors? Inquisitors, where are you? Someone, help us. Unfamiliar Astartes, do you acknowledge your guilt? How dare you disrupt the veneration of the Emperor? Ah, what is that?" Rock, wearing his metal helmet, disregarded the clamor around him. He abruptly shifted his visor's gaze. His eyes focused on the Emperor's statue, which was emanating faint psychic undulations. The next moment, Rock, his magnetic boots barely making contact with the smooth floor, was entirely enveloped by a golden psychic aura. A pair of shimmering, golden psychic wings. And a fleeting, ethereal laurel wreath appeared above the six-armed Iron Rider Terminator. This astonishing spectacle naturally triggered yet another round of fervent discussion among the hive nobles. "Ah, the Emperor has manifested. Holy Emperor, we beseech you to redeem us. Why an Astartes? Why not me? A noble angel has descended. What an honor for the motherworld of Adoma." However, Rock, still wearing his metal helmet, instinctively lowered his hand and gripped the heart of the forge. While these hive nobles stared at him with either fanatical devotion or cold, calculating expressions. Squads of local defense forces, along with segments of crusaders wielding storm shields and power swords, poured into the church's interior space through every available entrance. "Everyone. In the name of the Ordo Malleus Inquisitor of the Morbian sector, I order you to immediately evacuate the church." At that moment, a tall, gray-haired old woman pushed her way through the crowd. Stepping forward, she unhesitatingly waved a withered hand. She swiftly herded the hive nobles, each with their own distinct expression, towards the exit. Subsequently, the Inquisitor, her face impassive, turned around. She fixed her gaze upon Rock, who remained stationary, and shouted. "Unfamiliar Astartes, are you loyal? What is the purpose of your arrival?" As the Inquisitor's frigid inquiry echoed within the spacious church, squads of local defense forces quickly formed ranks behind her. Without hesitation, they raised their lasguns towards Rock's position. However, what unfolded next even caused Rock a flicker of surprise. The Crusaders, wielding storm shields and power swords, swiftly bypassed the makeshift line formed by the defense forces. They silently advanced, immediately turning and standing before Rock, raising their power weapons towards the local defense forces. Simultaneously, a fanatical cry from behind Rock reverberated throughout the church. "Insolent fools! How dare you disrespect the Emperor's angel? Inquisitor Grundle, do you desire to become a heretic, a traitor to the Holy Emperor? Have you maintained your allegiance to the Holy Emperor? Or do you intend to engage in open conflict with the Ecclesiarchy?" Before the sentence was completed, Rock, wearing his metal helmet, slightly adjusted his visor's gaze. Sure enough, the Cardinal Bishop, who had been terrified by the hovercraft and collapsed to the ground, seemed to have fully recovered. He waved his white mitre with fervent zeal. He relentlessly questioned the Inquisitor. At that moment, seeing the tension between the two factions escalating rapidly, Rock, standing still, abruptly released his grip on the heart of the forge. He then removed his metal helmet. He revealed a familiar bald head, gleaming with a bronze sheen, to everyone present. Squinting slightly, Rock scanned the faces of those present, their expressions unreadable, and said in a low voice, "I am an Astartes of the Salamanders chapter, you may call me Omegan. In the Emperor's name, we have come to quell this rebellion. Now, can anyone tell me, if you possess enough manpower to engage in a firefight, why haven't you suppressed the Hive's rebellion?" At that moment, confronted with Rock's slow, deliberate question, whether it was the female Inquisitor with her indifferent expression or the Cardinal with his fanatical gaze, they seemed to be completely immersed in an extremely strange state of silence. At the same time, Iron Man David, clad in power armor, quietly appeared. He stood quietly beside Roche, holding up the battle group banner. PFF'd. However, a burst of violent vomiting from the veteran Hassan and the psyker Lucy unexpectedly broke the tense atmosphere that was gradually solidifying among everyone, and subconsciously attracted everyone's attention. In the end, this conflict, which was very likely to occur, completely dissipated. About an hour later, Roche, wearing the six-armed Iron Rider armor, sat at the far end of a luxurious dining table with a very playful expression. Before him, a large amount of delicacies that Hive City commoners would rarely see in their entire lives almost covered the entire exquisite table. Iron Man David, clad in power armor, also sat near the dining table. However, he was unmoved by the delicacies before him. Iron Man David only occasionally rotated his metal helmet, repeatedly scanning the people passing by through his visor. At this moment, one fanatical ecclesiarchy preacher after another, led by several high-ranking priests and deacons, entered this brightly lit hall in succession. They continuously knelt and praised Roche in the direction he was in, anticipating Rock's response. And the Cardinal, who had just changed into a gold-trimmed white robe, stood alone beside Roche. He waved the scepter in his palm with a smile on his face, constantly signaling the preachers who had finished kneeling to leave this place as soon as possible. "Cardinal Harif, have them stop kneeling for now and withdraw." Just then, Roche, who was repeatedly playing with a golden goblet in his steel-gloved hand, suddenly turned his head and instructed the Cardinal beside him. Cardinal Harif, with a smile on his face, was slightly taken aback at first. He then concealed the smile on his face. With a solemn expression, he waved his scepter once again towards the people inside the brightly lit hall. After everyone had completely left this place, Cardinal Harif, with a smile reappearing on his face, slightly lowered his back and respectfully said into Rock's ear, "Honorable Angel, are you not satisfied with the meal before you? The preparation time was a bit rushed." "Tisk tisk, Cardinal Harif, I actually don't mind you treating me as someone who is borrowing power to intimidate. After all, I do need a suitable identity to mobilize manpower to suppress the rebellion. But if you think that I haven't noticed the petty power struggles between you, then you underestimate us Astartes too much. Roche, a hint of a cold smile on the corner of his mouth, slightly rotated his bald head, which gleamed with a bronze luster. He stared at Cardinal Harif, whose forehead was beginning to ooze cold sweat, and asked in a low voice. How much military force can you currently mobilize? Honorable Angel, the local Ecclesiarchy's Holy Guard can mobilize about 500 people, plus some zealots who are willing to dedicate themselves to the Emperor. I can recruit a suppression force of about 1,500 people for you. Cardinal Harif, subconsciously licking his lips while wiping the sweat from his forehead, quickly said to Roche, who had a blank expression. Roche slightly shook his head. He blinked his eyes, thought for a moment, and said, Then, how many people are in the Mobian 6th Regiment that started this Hive City rebellion? As far as I know, including some wounded soldiers, there are about 5,000 people. If they take the opportunity to unite the gangs in the Underhive, the specific number of personnel will be impossible to count. Cardinal Harif seemed to hesitate for a moment. But he still told Roche everything truthfully. So, you just let this rebellion continue to spread, until you can't even protect the most important Lehman Russ production line. How dare you? Honorable Angel, I can't help it. Our planetary governor experienced assassination at the first moment the rebellion broke out, and fell into a coma. Whether he can survive now is still a question. This is not a shrine world. You see those Hive City nobles willing to come to participate in the prayer service, but the Ecclesiarchy's influence here is actually very limited. In addition, that old woman from the Inquisition forcibly seized the command of the local defense force in the name of the Inquisitor. She always uses the review power of the Inquisition to suppress others, and those commanders who want to unite with our Ecclesiarchy to suppress the rebellion have no way to do anything. At this moment, listening to Cardinal Harif's perhaps heartfelt complaints, Roche, squinting his eyes, suddenly raised his thick eyebrows, and said in a calm tone, Oh, is there such a thing happening? How about this? You go and inform that female Inquisitor, and say that I want to meet her in person. Of course, if she doesn't dare to come, then it's not impossible for me to go to her door. Ah, Honorable Angel, you. All right, I'll go right away. Cardinal Harif was slightly stunned. The cold sweat seeping out of his forehead seemed to be even more. However, when he saw Rock's ice-cold gaze staring straight at him, Cardinal Harif quickly turned his body and began to trot all the way out of the brightly lit hall. After the other party's figure completely disappeared from Rock's sight, the mechanical voice from Iron Man David slowly transmitted to Rock's ear. My lord, I personally believe that this cardinal who expressed goodwill towards us did not tell the complete truth. David, I know. I even suspect that the mastermind behind the assassination of the planetary governor at the beginning of the rebellion was either him or that female inquisitor, not some rebels. However, these are temporarily irrelevant to us. As long as they are willing to provide manpower and equipment to suppress the rebellion, I can pretend to be ignorant of this. But if they are not aware of the times, then don't blame me for being cold-blooded and ruthless. At that time, I would rather let the rebels wreak havoc in the Hive City, let an Imperial Lehman Russ production line be completely scrapped, and also thoroughly clean up this group of Imperial parasites who occupy positions without doing any work. At this moment, Roche, with a cold expression, slowly kneaded the golden goblet in his palm into a lump of metal scrap. He casually threw the metal scrap on the exquisitely shaped dining table, making an extremely crisp metallic collision sound. Not much time had passed, accompanied by a series of hurried footsteps. The gray-haired female judge, Ms. Grundle, walked into the brightly lit hall with her back straight. However, before the squinting Roche could open his mouth to inquire, Judge Grundle took the lead and started the first conversation between the two sides with a sentence that could trigger more rebellions. Your Excellency Angel, the planetary governor of this hive world was assassinated by my men. Reason? However, Roche seemed to be mentally prepared for this. He nodded at the bronze bald head without showing any emotion. He asked the female judge expressionlessly. So, Judge Grundle told Roche about her series of investigations. The planetary governor here has long seized the support materials and glorious battle achievements of the Mobian 6th Regiment. He even failed to report the corresponding battle situation to the Ministry of Military Affairs. This is also one of the reasons that ultimately triggered the rebellion of the Moby and 6th Regiment. The family forces of the planetary governor himself are in order to live a more extravagant life. He even dared to secretly sell the assembly parts of the Lyman Russ tank to some wandering merchants. Moreover, it is said that the local state religion, in order to expand the scope of belief and increase its own power, also participated in some unclear things inside the hive. This is also an important factor why the judge is unwilling to mobilize troops to suppress the rebellion. She was afraid of being backstabbed by the other party, which would cause greater chaos. It's just that Ms. Grundle also told Roche, she has no evidence in her hand to prove this. However, Judge Grundle stated the real reason for her assassination of the planetary governor. It was just because she had been rescued by the Moby and 6th Regiment in the past, and she felt pity for their experience. It has nothing to do with dirty things like power struggles. Roche listened to the other party's explanation expressionlessly. He slowly shook his bronze head. Ms. Grundle, betrayal is betrayal. Even if the Moby and 6th Regiment has grievances that even the Emperor should pity, they have ultimately embarked on a path of no return that they should not have chosen. If enduring grievances is to cause a major industrial hive to fall into complete chaos, then I am afraid that no planet in the Empire can maintain basic stability. Moreover, what if all this is an illusion you see, and the real reason for their rebellion is that they have been polluted and corrupted by chaos? How much pity would you still have for them? Therefore, in the name of the Emperor, I will grant them the final liberation. That is all I can do. Rock's voice just fell. The expressionless Judge Grundle seemed to be in a state of contemplation. Then, she slowly knelt on one knee in the direction of Roche, completely offering her loyalty. Your Excellency Angel, for the Emperor, I am willing to assist you in quelling this hive rebellion that should not have happened. As orders were issued one after another, local defense force troops, fully armed, were completely mobilized. They carried many heavy weapons and necessary ammunition. Began to carry out a step-by-step cleaning mission inside the hive. At the same time, the fanatical believers from the state religion, led by the 500 holy warriors, also joined Rock's command. At this moment, Roche, wearing the 6 armed iron cavalry, and the Iron Man David, wearing power armor, stood at the entrance of the middle hive. He turned his head and glanced at the fanatical believers behind him, then slowly put on his metal helmet. Then, accompanied by the battle group flag raised high by the Iron Man David, the suppression force, with Roche as the spearhead of the team, slowly advanced towards the newly repaired middle hive passage. Soon after, the rebels, who seemed to have received the news, also engaged in fierce battles with the local defense forces. However, the addition of Roche and the Holy See fanatics. Almost instantly, the rebel front collapsed. The Iron Man David, who temporarily took over the command authority of the local defense forces, also constantly mobilized the direction of everyone's attack. A cat-and-mouse-like siege and interception was launched with the rebels inside the middle hive. It only took 3 days. The entire middle hive was completely recovered by Roche and others. The stubborn rebels left a pile of corpses behind. Also quickly retreated to the lower hive, which is more complex in terms of combat environment and personnel composition. They even frantically blew up the giant elevator connecting the middle hive, trying to prevent the continued pursuit of the suppression force. Roche was not worried about this. He ordered the Iron Man David to lead the technicians from the middle hive to quickly repair the giant elevator. Then, Roche, wearing the 6 armed iron cavalry, took the giant elevator alone and arrived at the gloomy and dark lower hive. He unexpectedly relied on the terrifying firepower and defensive capabilities of the Terminator. He hard-killed a large area of open space for subsequent troops to enter, winning more preparation time for everyone. However, the rebels, who seemed to have completely fallen into a state of madness, also triggered some special changes that Roche could not have foreseen. Boom boom boom, accompanied by a continuous roar of explosive bullets. The Storm explosive bullet gun, automatically controlled by the servo-mechanical arm, continuously spewed out dazzling tongues of fire. The firelight exploding in midair also repeatedly reflected the extremely dim lower hive space. Roche, wearing the 6 armed iron cavalry, stood behind a broken wall. He shot one by one at the whirlwind missiles in the distance that were constantly rising into the air and repeatedly attacking the direction of the giant elevator. Not far behind him, a large number of local defense forces and fanatics who had just entered the ground of the lower hive were adapting to the harsh environment here through breathing masks, trying to recover their combat capabilities as soon as possible. "My lord, the Holy See Army has received an order from Archbishop Khalifa. They are forbidden to enter the lower hive. Do I need to go back and regain command, or directly attack Archbishop Khalifa?" The mechanical voice from the Iron Man David suddenly reached Rock's ears. Roche, wearing a metal helmet, stared at the lower hive space that seemed to be temporarily in a state of silence, and he said in a low voice, "David, ignore him for now. After we have dealt with the rebels in the lower hive, there will be time to play tricks with them." "Wait, what is that?" At this moment, Roche suddenly noticed some abnormal conditions in the scope of his eyepiece. He actually saw a train traction head, constantly emitting thick green mist, speeding towards the direction of the giant elevator. Roche only glanced at the green mist that was floating back and forth. The next second, a very ominous premonition completely occupied his entire mind. "Everyone, scatter immediately. Scatter, all of you. Concentrate heavy firepower and completely blow up that train head. Quick, quick, quick." Roche drove the six-armed Iron Knight Terminator, quickly stepping onto the broken walls. The four servo-mechanical arms located behind the power backpack instantly raised up completely. Whether it was the Gauss burst rifle or the multi-barrel heat melter, or the ion rifle and stormbolter, almost simultaneously, they unleashed a continuous barrage of firepower at the oncoming train's engine. At this moment, a large number of local defense forces quickly scattered around, seeking suitable combat cover. Only those zealots who weren't even wearing carapace armor disregarded the potential casualties. They continuously chanted prayer scriptures, raising their whirlwind missile launchers and heavy lumber guns. Coordinating with Rock's actions, they launched a sky-covering, earth-shattering bombardment at the train's engine. Rumble, rumble. Just as the train's engine was still hundreds of meters away from Roche and the others. The continuous barrage of firepower finally caused the burning train engine to completely derail. Then, it rolled and tumbled, sweeping towards the surrounding buildings. However, before Roche could feel any relief from the train engine's overturning, da da da, accompanied by a rustling sound of dense footsteps, and the low, deep roars rising and falling in the dim light. One by one, Nurgle zombies with festering skin and bodies entwined with wisps of green mist staggered out of the dark shadows of the underhive buildings. At the same time, renegades with better equipment hid behind the Nurgle zombie horde, seizing the opportunity to launch counterattacks one after another towards the suppressing forces. "Morbius 6th Regiment, you truly deserve to die." Roche gritted his teeth and let out a low roar after quickly scanning the scene in front of him through his helmet's visor. Without turning his head, he shouted loudly at the people behind him. "Everyone, perk up. Listen to my orders, for your families, and for the tens of thousands of civilians in the Hive City. We must defend the entrance to the tunnel connecting the mid-hive. Chaos has corrupted the renegades and the underhive residents. We cannot allow them to contaminate the entire Hive City again. This is our inherent duty." For the Emperor, Rock's voice had just fallen. He unhesitatingly drove the six-armed Iron Knight Terminator towards the vanguard of the Nurgle zombie horde. As the heavy magnetic boots repeatedly stomped on the ground, the ready-to-fire furnace heart and the green light-entwined blood scythe were already tightly gripped in his palms. For the God Emperor, for the Angel. At this moment, almost all the zealots uttered a deafening, frenzied roar in unison. Holding crude melee weapons, they also followed closely behind Roche without hesitation, launching a charge to the death against the Chaos enemies in front of them. After an extremely brief hesitation, the vast majority of the local defense forces immediately and methodically set up airtight lines of fire and temporary fire fortresses around the entrance of the giant elevator. One by one, whirlwind missiles also quickly rose into the air, launching a carpet bombing towards the renegades hiding behind the Chaos enemies. Faced with this threat from Chaos, everyone had no choice. Whether it was for the Imperium or for themselves. Chi Chi, chi, accompanied by the muffled sound of sharp blades quickly cutting into flesh. The green light entwined blood scythe took the lead in slashing through a large group of Nurgle zombies, forcefully cutting open their rotten, stinking, bloated bodies. The next second, the furnace heart in Rock's palm instantly raised up and pulled the trigger fiercely at the Nurgle zombie horde surging towards him. Z. In an instant, the plasma ball erupted from the furnace heart quickly formed a large plasma tide. The Nurgle zombies within a range of dozens of meters were instantly melted into wisps of black smoke exuding a fishy, foul smell. At the same time, the ion rifle located behind Rock's power backpack automatically activated sniper mode. One after another, spiral-shaped ion beams constantly pierced through extremely long distances, accurately shooting at those Chaos renegades who were trying to control heavy firepower. At this moment, Rorschach, wearing the six-armed Iron Knight Terminator, actually managed to hold back most of the enemies on the battlefield with his own strength. However, at this time, the casualties suffered by the zealots who followed Rorschach in launching the charge became increasingly heavy. Even though the zealots were never afraid of sacrifice and could fight 10 against 1. The Nurgle zombie horde was almost endless. Even the fallen zealots would quickly rise up and join this chaos carnival. Boom! Accompanied by a dazzling explosion of fire. The multi-barrel heat melter located behind the power backpack suddenly erupted a terrifying stream of molten lava outwards. Also completely melting a renegade carrying a heat melter bomb who was trying to fish in troubled waters and approach Rocks back into wisps of dissipating steam. Seemingly not caring about this danger at all, Rorschach continued to wave the blood scythe in his palm, desperately harvesting the constantly surging Nurgle zombies. David, tell Inquisitor Grundle to take over the command of the entire Hive City in the name of the Inquisition. Immediately send more troops to the Underhive. Also, send all the Crusaders and Zealots down to me. If Archbishop Harif doesn't listen to reason, then send him to meet the Emperor. Before Rock's voice could fade away, he immediately heard the mechanical voice from Iron Man David in his ear. Received, my lord. However, Archbishop Harif's head is currently in my palm. According to the news he accidentally revealed before his death, he has been informing the Renegade Command Echelon. His original intention was to turn this Hive City into a church world. Then he didn't die unjustly. David, when you and the Inquisitor are mobilizing the Hive City's forces that can be mobilized, treat anyone who resists or disobeys orders as a heretic. Kill without mercy. After the words fell, Rorschach, who was waving the blood scythe back and forth in his palm, refocused all his attention on the battlefield in front of him. At this moment, many Nurgle zombies who had passed through the Zealot defense line had already engaged in a brief firefight with the local defense forces. Fortunately, the continuous firepower of the defense forces also forcibly blocked the Nurgle zombie horde's advance. Rorschach, wearing the six-armed Iron Knight, immediately turned the direction of his advance. He was like a hot knife cutting into butter. Passing through layers of Nurgle zombie hordes, he began a support operation for the heavily wounded Zealots. A few minutes later, Rorschach, who had regrouped the Zealot team and once again became the spearhead of the attack, continued to launch a charge in the direction of the renegades. Compared to the endless Nurgle zombie hordes around them, these heretics who betrayed the Emperor and humanity are the real culprits of this chaos invasion. Rorschach must try his best to eliminate them before these guys cause even bigger trouble. Countless green beams swiftly streaked across the sky, forcibly obliterating the rebel enemies who were attempting to set up whirlwind missile launchers. Rokas, clad in six-armed iron cavalry armor, led the remaining hundreds of zealots behind him. Like a sharp blade, he repeatedly pierced through the Nurgle zombie horde, continuously zigzagging towards the center of the rebels' position. He would occasionally halt his advance. Utilizing the terrifying firepower controlled by his servo-mechanical arms, he suppressed the rebels' heavy weaponry. And the whirlwind missiles from the local defense forces also provided considerable fire support for Rokas and his men. However, at this moment, behind the rebels' lines, more than a dozen colossal, grotesquely obese chaos spawn were slowly revealing their repulsive and terrifying forms. Chaos spawn? They must have started the ritual? Rokas, without turning his head, shouted loudly to the scarred but still fanatical zealots behind him. We absolutely cannot give them the chance to open a chaos gate. Otherwise, everything will be too late. For the Emperor, charge with me. As soon as the words left his mouth, Rokas quickly retracted the forge heart from his palm. He tightly gripped the blood scythe with both hands. His entire being spun like a windmill, unleashing a frenzied whirlwind into the Nurgle zombie horde. The storm bolter and plasma rifle, having exhausted their ammunition, were immediately slung onto the back of his power pack by the servo-mechanical arms. The next second, the two 2-meter-long servo-mechanical arms fully extended. Their metal surfaces were completely enveloped in a layer of azure disintegration field. Subsequently, the adamantium mechanical arms, with an effect comparable to power weapons, mercilessly hacked and swept at the Nurgle zombie horde surrounding Rokas. Before long, the frenzied assault of Rokas even carved a path to the rebels' position for the zealots behind him. One by one, the zealots, with expressions of utmost piety and eyes burning with fanaticism, roared loudly, shaking the surroundings. They either brandished crude melee weapons or continuously overloaded the lasguns in their hands. Throwing caution to the wind, they launched a relentless death charge towards the rebels' position. Boom boom boom, accompanied by a series of explosions and violent roars caused by the continuous overloading of lasguns. Gaps were instantly torn open in the front lines of the rebel position. The remaining zealots fearlessly engaged the rebels in even more brutal and bloody close combat. Even the well-trained rebels temporarily found it difficult to resist these fanatical zealots and had to retreat backward. At the same time, Rokas, clad in the 6-armed iron cavalry armor, as the only high-level combatant on the entire battlefield, he resolutely faced the dozen or so colossal chaos spawn. Boom boom boom. Reacting swiftly, Rokas unhesitatingly manipulated the servo-mechanical arms, completely emptying the remaining ammunition from the multi-melta, turning the 6 chaos spawn into blazing magma torches in the blink of an eye. Then, he brandished the green glowing blood scythe in his palm. Activating the 6-armed iron cavalry, he preemptively crashed into a flailing chaos spawn. Crack! Instantly, the invisible force field, having endured several heavy blows from the chaos spawn, shattered with a bang, causing the shield generator inside the armor to enter an overloaded state. But Rokas, completely unconcerned, did not hesitate. He swung the blood scythe in his palm back and forth. Almost in the blink of an eye, he hacked the chaos spawn in front of him into countless fragments of rotten flesh. At the same time, the 2 adamantium mechanical arms wrapped in the disintegration field also forcibly pierced through the swollen heads of 2 chaos spawn, tearing apart most of their rotten bodies. Chi. A large amount of putrid and foul-smelling green liquid splattered onto Roka's ceramite shell, producing faint corrosive sounds. The chaos spawn closest to him roared fiercely, wanting to wield the heavy weapon in its hand again. But Rokas easily severed its entire head with a sudden sweep of the blood scythe. Thud! The headless, swollen corpse crashed to the ground with a resounding thud. Rokas, slightly shaking his metal helmet, stared at the 3 remaining chaos spawn not far away. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the blood scythe in his palm. Boom boom boom. However, just as Rokas was about to activate the 6-armed iron cavalry to once again engage the chaos spawn in fierce combat, accompanied by a violent tremor that suddenly tore through the air, huge metal projectiles, grazing past the ceramite shoulder armor, forcibly blasted apart the chaos spawn not far away. Rokas immediately turned his head to look back. Through his visor, he saw 3 Leman Russ tanks, having just emerged from a giant elevator, slowly adjusting the firing angles of their cannons behind the defense force position heavily surrounded by the Nurgle zombie horde. At the same time, Rokas heard the mechanical voice of Iron Man David in his ears. "My lord, our reinforcements have arrived. 1,000 Crusaders and the local defense forces armored units are continuously entering the field. Inquisitor Grundle has completely taken control of the entire Hive's command. If the situation becomes critical, the Astropathic Choir has also prepared to contact the Sisters of Battle." "Well done, David." Rokas quickly retracted his gaze. He activated the 6-armed iron cavalry and charged back towards the rebels' position, unleashing a cruel massacre on the routed rebel enemies. and with the continuous and unwavering fire support of the defense forces. The Lehman Russ tanks, neatly lined up, quickly launched a pushing action towards the Nurgle zombie horde. Rows of constantly rotating metal tracks continuously reduced the overall number of Nurgle zombies like meat grinders. At this moment, Rokas, taking the lead, led the remaining dozen or so zealots to stand behind the rebels' position, restoring their strength while waiting for the arrival of the support troops. Soon after, a Lehman Russ tank slowly stopped in front of Rokas. Squeak. After the metal hatch was opened, Iron Man David, clad in power armor, was the first to step out of the tank's interior. And in the position behind him, the veteran Hassan, carrying a Helgen, and the Psyker Lucy also revealed their spirited figures. "My lord. Lord Angel." Rokas stared at Iron Man David and the two people who came to support him, slightly shaking his head. Without any hesitation, he said to the people in front of him. The remaining rebel forces seem to have retreated to the more dangerous depths of the Underhive. It will be difficult for the Lehman Russ tanks to go down there. But to prevent them from actually creating a chaos gate, I will lead a strike team to carry out a decapitation operation. David, order the defense forces battle lines to move forward, completely clearing out the remaining Nurgle zombies. As for you two, if you are not afraid of death, then come with me. The lowest level of any human hive city. It could be said that it is one of the most harsh environments for survival in the entire galaxy. Countless industrial wastes and biochemical garbage from above have almost permeated every inch of the Underhive's land. Even the air is filled with nearly visible toxic particles, making it impossible to breathe. Even a commoner who has completely adapted to the environment of the Underhive would probably not survive for long if they rashly entered this place. Buzz buzz buzz. In an instant, beams of dazzling light, like sharp swords, suddenly pierced through the dense darkness of the Underhive that had lasted for countless years. It also instantly startled away a large number of Underhive creatures of various sizes in the shadows, making rustling and terrifying noises. At this moment, wearing the six-armed Iron Rider's armor, Rorschach held the blood scythe in his palm and walked to the forefront of the decapitation squad. He glanced at the dense life signs on the life detection device and couldn't help but gasp. If Rorschach's understanding of the Hive City and even the Underhive in the past was only based on written materials, then now, he truly understood the harsh environment in which the people of the Hive City lived. Ah! Just then, a miserable wail suddenly came from the rear of the decapitation squad. Reacting quickly, Rorschach immediately drove the six-armed Iron Rider's armor to run back. By the time Rorschach quickly arrived at the location where the sound came from, Iron Man David, with the battle group flag standing above his power pack, was already standing there. He was using his two metal hands covered in ceramite, forcefully prying open a giant gray shell that firmly clamped onto the lower body of a guardsman. Waste ash clam, a mysterious Underhive creature of unknown origin. Usually, they only grow in the dust wastelands outside the Underhive city walls. These guys use their sensitivity to vibrations to suddenly open their gray clamshells, which are like pliers, devouring any living thing that passes above it in one bite, like a naturally growing anti-personnel mine. But under normal circumstances, waste ash clams can only grow to about half a meter. The difficulty for them to completely devour a living person is probably greater than the Emperor getting up from the Golden Throne and dancing. However, when Rorschach's gaze accidentally swept over the industrial waste and lush green toxic substances that were everywhere nearby, he didn't feel much surprise at the giant waste ash clam in front of him that was enough to swallow most of a guardsman. Seeing the guardsman's miserable wailing gradually subside, and the struggling gradually slow down, and Iron Man David's rescue operation would take more time, Rorschach unhesitatingly took out a bottle of panacea capsules from the storage space of his power pack. He drove the six-armed Iron Rider's armor to step forward, poured out a handful of panacea capsules, and then Rorschach violently lifted the breathing mask on the guardsman's face, stuffing the panacea capsules into the guardsman's mouth, who was constantly vomiting blood. Quickly getting up, Rorschach waved his ceramite hand at Iron Man David, signaling him to step aside temporarily. Then, he held the blood scythe in his palm and brought the knife down. The sharp blade edge surrounded by green light instantly disassembled the entire giant waste ash clam into bloody chunks of flesh and shell. The guardsman, who had stopped his painful wailing due to the effect of the panacea, gradually regained his senses. He quickly climbed out of the bloody wreckage. Then, without hesitation, he knelt on one knee to Rorschach to show his gratitude for saving his life. Rorschach didn't care much about this. He slightly shook his metal helmet, holding the blood scythe in his palm. Turning around, he passed through the crowd whose eyes were filled with a bit of fanaticism, and walked towards the depths of the Underhive. For these people who voluntarily followed him to the Underhive to carry out the decapitation operation. No matter what their past identity and experience were. At least at this moment, they were all human heroes worthy of being remembered by the Imperium. Even if the other party was just a big head who couldn't play much of a role against the rebels. Rorschach was unwilling to easily give up any comrade who fought with him. Soon after, the decapitation squad led by Rorschach gradually detected the traces of the rebels. To be precise, they found the traces left by the corpses of the rebels. At this moment, Rorschach, wearing a metal helmet, stared through his visor as a mass of slime-like ice mud slowly crawled across his field of vision. Inside the completely transparent abdomen of this Underhive creature, a rebel corpse with a terrified expression was rolling back and forth in the faintly glowing digestive fluid. All teammates, be vigilant. Prepare for a firefight. We may not be far from the rebels' tail. Rorschach made a very cautious judgment based on the degree of digestion of the rebel corpse. He issued instructions to everyone in the decapitation squad through the communication device. And as Rorschach's voice fell, the remaining 13 zealots, who had been through life and death with Rorschach, instantly gripped the power weapons or laser guns in their palms. The 50 guardsmen also quickly lowered their heads to check the whirlwind missile launchers and heavy lumber guns they carried with them. They were ready to meet the attack from the rebels at any time. At this time, Iron Man David, driving the power armor, led veteran Hassan and psychic Lucy to Rorschach's side. He said to Rorschach through the communication channel, "My lord, Lucy may have detected the location of the rebels' garrison. She vaguely sensed signs of a large amount of psychic energy flowing." "Oh, is there such a good thing? This will save us a lot of tracking time. Lucy, you lead the way for us." Rorschach unhesitatingly ordered the psychic Lucy to follow behind him. He waved his ceramite hand at the crowd once again, leading the entire decapitation squad to continue forward into the dark depths of the Underhive. However, as time passed and they approached the rebels' garrison, Rorschach faintly heard the low hum of laser weapons and the familiar roar of solid ammunition in his ears. At the same time, in the darkness and the distance, the intense firelight that constantly illuminated the dim sky quickly spread into the field of vision of the crowd. Who exactly are the rebels fighting with? Underhive creatures. But the pollution and corruption of chaos is not something that a group of tooth and clawing Underhive creatures can easily resist, right? Rorschach, wearing a metal helmet, subconsciously muttered to himself. He slightly shook his head. Then he led the decapitation squad to speed up their pace. After the crowd, who had turned off their light sources, quietly sneaked to the top of a high cliff. Rorschach's keen senses clearly heard the extremely fierce firefight and slaughter constantly coming from the lower position of the cliff. So, while ordering the surrounding people to prepare for battle, he drove the 6-armed Iron Rider's armor and carefully approached the edge of the cliff, carefully peeking down. The next moment, a battlefield that was also very absurd for Rorschach was completely presented in his field of vision. On this burning battlefield filled with a large number of industrial wrecks, one ragged hybrid acolyte after another rushed to the forefront of the battle line. They wielded tattered solid ammunition weapons and engaged in fierce battles with one shambling Nurgle zombie after another. A dozen tall aberrants constantly wielded very ugly metal hammers in their palms, launching a terrifying charge against the chaos spawn that occasionally appeared in the Nurgle zombie horde. At the same time, an even larger abominant and a disgusting Nurgle beast collided fiercely in succession. In judging from the fighting movements between the two sides, the Nurgle beast, whose huge body was as soft and juicy as a slug, had actually fallen into a disadvantage. But what shocked Rorschach even more was that, in front of the rebels' makeshift garrison, A heavily armored Goliath truck was under the heavy cover of two incomplete Lehman Russ tanks. Bearing the rebels' extremely fierce firepower, it launched a continuous and fierce impact on the entrance of the garrison. For the four-armed Emperor, the rebellion can be lost. Chaos must die. In an instant, the battle roars rose and fell from the mouths of the Genestealer cult priests, quickly echoing in the sky above the entire battlefield. All the Genestealers seemed to feel the blessing of some kind of psychic power. Their offensive intensity against the rebels actually rose a lot once again. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Luo Sha's emotional fluctuation was fleeting. He carefully retracted his observation, driving the six-armed iron cavalry back to its hidden position. Next, Luo Sha ordered the defense force to set up the whirlwind missile launchers and heavy logging guns they carried along the edge of the cliff one by one. After everyone in the decapitation squad learned about the chaotic situation below, Luo Sha also began to issue combat orders to the squad. Although they could let the two sides continue fighting until one side won. But if the desperate rebels decided to perish together and eventually sacrifice the Chaos Gate, then the people of the entire Hive City, including those Genestealers, would all be big losers who had completely failed. Therefore, the primary task of the decapitation squad was to help the Genestealers completely blast open the entrance to the rebel base. And Luo Sha would lead the 13 zealots into the rebel base, decapitate the command echelon and interrupt the internal sacrificial ritual, thereby ending the deadly threat of chaos. Choose the lesser of two evils. Clean up the rebels corrupted by chaos first, and then worry about the problem of rampant Genestealers later. Luo Sha ordered Iron Man David to temporarily open the power armor and take out the melta-bombs hidden inside the armor. Then, he turned around and stared at the zealots in front of him, who looked tired but still had fanatic eyes. Luo Sha seemed to hesitate for a moment, but he didn't say much, just said in a low voice, "At this moment, the Emperor must be watching you. The thousands of people in the Hive City will also be grateful for your sacrifice. May your souls return to the Golden Throne." As soon as the words fell, Luo Sha unhesitatingly took the melta-bombs from Iron Man David's palm and personally distributed them to the zealots in front of him. These zealots also looked indifferent, took them casually without fear, and put them in their arms. Immediately afterwards, they bowed slightly to Luo Sha in unison. God Emperor is above. Being able to fight alongside the angel is also the only glory in our short lives. We will definitely complete your order. At this moment, Luo Sha seemed to see a fleeting golden light on the calm faces of the zealots. But he didn't sense any psychic fluctuations. So, Luo Sha could only attribute this to visual fatigue caused by long-term combat. A few minutes later, Luo Sha, who was also hung with melta-bombs around his waist, led the suicide squad to sneak towards the lower cliff. Chi. After Luo Sha and others were in place, the whirlwind missiles that quickly rose into the air were like a battle horn, completely blowing the prelude to the human Foss's attack. For the four-armed God Emperor, accompanied by the low roar from inside the metal helmet, gradually resounding throughout the hive, Luo Sha, wearing the six-armed iron cavalry, took the lead in rushing down the low cliff. He carried the blood scythe in his palm, manipulating the servo-mechanical arm that activated the decomposition force field. Like a completely out-of-control train, he launched a terrifying charge with an astonishing momentum towards the rebel base that was constantly covered and bombarded by whirlwind missiles. And it seems that because Luo Sha shouted the same battle cry as the Genestealers. Or perhaps the Genestealers' hatred for the Chaos Forces far exceeds that of ordinary humans. In short, the sudden six-armed iron cavalry did not suffer any attacks from the Genestealers. On the contrary, the command echelon of the Genestealers also took advantage of the favorable opportunity of the rebel base being repeatedly bombarded. Once again ordered a large number of Genestealers to launch a continuous and fierce attack on the entrance of the rebel base. Boom boom boom, explosions and flames continued to rise inside the rebel base. The heavily armored Goliath truck also completely crashed through the rebel base's simple defenses. Immediately began to cooperate with the Leman Russ tanks with missing parts to carry out cruel crushing and shooting inside. At this moment, the 13 zealots carrying melta bombs also took advantage of the short-term chaos to cross the battlefield. They lurked on the periphery of the rebel base, intending to wait for an opportunity to act. Dong dong dong. At the same time, Luo Sha, who was driving the 6-armed iron cavalry with all his strength, was like a mad bull. He forcibly used his heavy shoulder armor to knock away a tall mutant that was blocking his charge route and broke into the interior of the rebel base. He slammed his feet on the ground, breaking the magnetic boots covered in blood and dust. One of Luo Sha's palms pulled down a melta bomb from his waist. After casually activating it, he immediately threw it forcefully towards the building inside the rebel base. Rumble rumble. Along with the roaring loud noise of the building constantly collapsing, the invisible force field of the shield generator instantly made a muffled sound. A series of exploding hot lasers and solid bullets were quickly blocked by the invisible force field. In order to avoid becoming the target of public criticism, Luo Sha ran again. He swung the blood scythe in his palm forcefully. Without hesitation, he completely cut off dozens of gene stealers and corrupted rebels who rushed towards him. Immediately afterwards, Luo Sha quickly rotated the goggles covered in viscous blood. He deliberately chose a direction with the largest number of rebels, who might be performing a sacrificial ritual, and launched another charge. And whether it was the rebels who were desperately fighting back or the gene stealers who were fighting bravely, as long as they dared to block Luo Sha's charge path, he would treat them equally and send them to the path of death. And as time slowly passed, the situation on the entire battlefield also changed visibly. Compared to the seemingly endless number of gene stealers, even the Nurgle zombies temporarily transformed by the rebels were not enough for combat consumption. Even if the rebels could barely regain some disadvantage by relying on their well-trained combat order and the advantage of weapons and equipment. But Luo Sha, who was rampaging across the entire battlefield and constantly interrupting the sacrificial ritual, also became the mastermind behind the rebels' demise. Rumble rumble. Not long after, along with a deafening explosion, the last scarred zealot detonated the rebel arsenal with the terrifying power of the melta bomb. Also accidentally blasted the other party's headquarters directly into the sky. And once and for all solved the command brain and the source of corruption of the Mobian 6th Regiment. This rebel force, which had once suffered great injustice but eventually chose to corrupt and fall, was only one step away from its final demise. But, for Luo Sha and the decapitation squad that followed him, it was just the beginning of another fierce battle, not the end of the entire battle. At this moment, Luo Sha, who was driving the 6-armed iron cavalry with all his strength, manipulated the Gauss burst gun above the power backpack, constantly bombarding the cockpit of the Goliath truck. A series of terrifying green beams instantly annihilated the gene stealer driver inside into constantly dissipating green atoms. Then, he pulled down 2 melta bombs from his waist. Without hesitation, he launched a charge head-on towards the 2 Leman Russ tanks that only had engine power and could not carry out fire bombing. The chaos crisis is lifted, the rebels are almost completely dead, it's time for you, loyal, gene stealers. For the Emperor, Roach drove the 6-armed Iron Rider forward in a charge. 3 servo-mechanical arms, enveloped in a shimmering blue disruptive field, extended to their fullest extent. They swept ferociously at the swarming gene stealers. Just as he was about to collide head-on with a Leman Russ tank, Roach's magnetic boots slammed onto the ground, and Shadow Step was immediately activated. His entire being leapt into the air like a streak of black shadow. Instantly arriving above the 2 Leman Russ tanks, Roach casually tossed down the activated melta bombs. Then, enduring the redirected fire of countless gene stealers, he activated Shadow Step once more. Rumble, accompanied by 2 muffled, thunderous booms. The terrifying melta bombs instantly destroyed the Leman Russ tank's thick armor, and completely incinerated the sneaky crew members inside. Subsequently, Roach, landing heavily, quickly gripped the green glowing blood scythe. He rapidly scanned the entire battlefield through the metal helmet's visor, searching for the location of the Genestealers' command echelon. Although the Genestealers were currently numerous, there was one thing to be thankful for. They had not yet spawned a Genestealer Magus or a leader. As long as Roach beheaded their Patriarch and the majority of their command echelon, then this Genestealer's scourge would be largely eliminated. Thump thump thump. Just then, accompanied by extremely heavy footsteps, a mutated overlord covered in festering wounds seemed to have received the Patriarch's orders. It abruptly reversed its direction of attack, charging head-on towards Roach's position. However, Roach, having vaguely located a portion of the command echelon, unhesitatingly activated his Invisible Man special talent. He actually vanished into thin air right under the Genestealers' noses. The mutated overlord, having temporarily lost its target, could only shake its ugly, oversized head, appearing to experience a state of bewilderment from the bottom of its heart. At this moment, Roach, wielding the blood scythe in his palm, drove the six-armed Iron Rider, easily breaking through the Genestealers' heavy encirclement. He quickly spoke into the communication device. "David, tell the Psyker Lucy to try her best to locate the direction of psychic energy gathering on the battlefield. The Genestealers' Patriarch is there. Once she finds it, notify me immediately." "Understood, my lord." Roach heard the reply from Iron Man David in his ear. He once again brandished the green glowing blood scythe in his palm and launched a fierce charge towards several commanding officers who were heavily protected by the Genestealer Guard. Thanks to the Invisible Man special talent, the Genestealer Guard, which would be very troublesome for ordinary Astartes squads, did not cause Roach much trouble. He vigorously swung the blood scythe back and forth several times. The vast majority of the Genestealer Guard completely lost their lives without even knowing where the enemy was. By the time Roach swiftly beheaded those several Genestealer commanding officers, the Genestealers, who had previously been filled with order in both offense and defense on the battlefield, immediately fell into considerable chaos. Taking advantage of this opportunity, some of the remaining rebels actually regrouped. They desperately wanted to break out of the Genestealers' heavy encirclement. The Genestealers can run, but you can't. Roach, wielding the blood scythe, noticed the changes on the battlefield through his visor. However, just as he was planning to drive the six-armed Iron Rider to completely annihilate the last small group of rebels, rumble, accompanied by the continuous bursting of industrial ruins and biochemical soil above the ground. A Genestealer monster, 6 meters tall, actually launched a treacherous surprise attack from underground towards Roach's position. And judging from the opponent's massive body covered in hard carapace and 4 enormous, sharp claws, that was undoubtedly the Genestealer's Patriarch. Chi. Reacting swiftly, Roach abruptly deployed the shield generator's invisible force field. The magnetic boots under his feet also slammed onto the ground, wanting to quickly retreat backward. However, one of the Genestealer Patriarch's incomparably sharp claws actually easily penetrated the invisible force field and grabbed straight at the front of Roach's helmet. Screech, accompanied by the ear-piercing sound of metal twisting and shattering. The metal helmet's respirator was almost completely shattered. If Roach's speed of retreat hadn't been fast enough, then his entire face, along with half of his head, would have already been mangled by the Genestealer Patriarch. Thump thump thump. In an instant, the 3 extended servo-mechanical arms, like nimble spider limbs, vigorously supported Roach's 6-armed Iron Rider, quickly carrying the heavy body away from the Genestealer Patriarch's attack range. At the same time, the Gauss burst rifle's green beams continuously and fiercely bombarded the Genestealer Patriarch's massive body, attempting to stop the opponent's next action. Hiss. Roach, having lost his respirator, took a deep breath of toxic air filled with chemical toxins. The detoxifying organ inside his body, Mortarian's regret, instantly began to operate intensely, dissolving any toxins inhaled into his body and feeling the burning sting constantly coming from his lungs. Roach's eyes gradually turned bloodshot. Feelings of anger were also constantly rising. "David, calculate as quickly as possible whether the space and structure of the Underhive can withstand the explosive power of a micronuclear warhead. I want to send these loyal Genestealers a cordial greeting from an Emperor's Primarch." Before Roach could finish speaking, he abruptly took off the nearly shattered metal helmet and casually threw it onto the nearby ground. Chi. The green beams from the Gauss burst rifle were basically dodged by the Genestealer Patriarch with incredible agility. Even the few hits that landed were unhesitatingly used by the Genestealer Patriarch to sever the injured areas with its sharp claws. At this moment, Roach, with a cold expression, ceased his useless shooting. His hands vigorously gripped the green glowing blood scythe. The three servo-mechanical arms behind the power pack also abruptly extended completely forward, making Roach look like a mechanical giant spider lying in wait. I know you can understand human language, so I'll also tell you plainly. From the moment I arrived, your entire race was doomed. You, the Patriarch, are also doomed. A ferocious sneer gradually appeared on Roach's Omiconian bronze face. He slowly said to the Genestealer Patriarch, whose movements were cautious and prudent, without any emotional fluctuations. The next moment, as if deeply stung by Roach's words, or perhaps having found a small flaw in Roach's body, the Genestealer Patriarch vigorously shook its four sharp claws. It abruptly let out a deafening roar towards the front, and then drove its massive body and pounced towards Roach. Roar. Just waiting for you. In a flash of lightning, Roach couldn't help but reveal a bloody, sinister grin. He unhesitatingly used Shadow Step on the Genestealer Patriarch who was in midair. Buzz buzz buzz. The blood scythe, wreathed in green light, was spun into an airtight green whirlwind. Rockard, using Shadow Step to launch a surprise attack on the Genestealer Patriarch, was like a phantom-like giant green spirit. He repeatedly circled the massive target, leaping and dodging, seeking a suitable opportunity to attack. Sure, at this moment, a servo arm heavily wrapped in a bright blue disintegration field forcefully swept forward. It forcibly sliced off one of the Genestealer Patriarch's sharp claws before it could retract, accompanied by the Genestealer Patriarch's sudden roar of anger. Rockard, gripping the blood scythe tightly in his palm, mercilessly continued to hack at the opponent's limbs. Sure, the Genestealer Patriarch's second sharp claw also snapped instantly, then fell heavily to the toxin-filled ground. However, just as Rockard, wearing a grim smile, wanted to press the attack, the Genestealer Patriarch suddenly rotated its massive body. Another sharp claw swiftly cut through the air, heavily striking Rockard's thick shoulder armor. Thump! Instantly, the heavy ceramite shoulder armor of the six-armed Iron Knight completely shattered and flew apart, completely exposing the internal electronic muscle fibers and shield generator. Even Rockard's heavy metallic body tilted heavily towards the ground. And the more he encountered extremely dangerous situations, the calmer Rockard's emotions became, without any panic or disarray. Just as he was about to fall, he took a deep breath of the toxin-filled air. Then, he unhesitatingly cast Shadow Step. Chur. In the next second, both dodging the Genestealer Patriarch's next attack with Shadow Step and trying to adjust his attacking posture, Rockard actually stood on the ground again. He once again brandished the green light-wreathed blood scythe. At the same time, the special function of the blood scythe was also launched ferociously under Rockard's control, only to see, under the repeated illumination of countless brilliant green lights, a large amount of purple blood was constantly being sucked out of the wounds on the Genestealer Patriarch's body, splattering into the air. This almost instantly plunged the Genestealer Patriarch into a weakened state that was temporarily difficult to recover from. Just at this moment, Rockard, barely dodging a sharp claw, abruptly yanked the last Melta-Bomb from his waist. He activated the Melta-Bomb without hesitation and immediately threw it towards the lower part of the Genestealer Patriarch's body. Rumble. Instantly, accompanied by extremely conspicuous explosive fire and terrifying heat waves, the Genestealer Patriarch's massive body was completely engulfed by the explosive heat of the Melta-Bomb in the blink of an eye. And Rockard, unable to run far enough, could only try his best to protect his unprotected head with his arms. Then, his entire body was heavily knocked to the ground by the sweeping shockwave. That's the stuff. After the heatwave and shockwave temporarily subsided, Rockard, with wisps of golden blood seeping from his nostrils and the corners of his mouth, forcefully supported himself up with the six-armed Iron Knight. He turned his head and glanced at the Genestealer Patriarch, of whom not even ashes remained. He subconsciously let out a deep, low cheer. Thump thump thump. Just at this moment, the sudden sound of heavy footsteps caused Rockard's slightly relaxed mind to tense up once again. He gripped the hilt of the blood scythe tightly and quickly propped up the six-armed Iron Knight. He extended 3 servo arms, intending to continue the fight. "My lord, are you all right? Sorry, I'm late." However, Iron Man David's mechanical voice completely put Rockard at ease. He slightly turned his gaze. Looking at Iron Man David, who was holding a phase sword in his palm, he grinned and said, "I'm fine, David, not dead yet, my lord, it's good that you're all right. According to your request, after my meticulous calculations, the core blast radius of the micro-nuke is 400 meters, the lethal radiation radius is 4 to 5 kilometers, and the drifting range of nuclear fallout is about 8 kilometers. Moreover, the micro-nuke must be buried 10 meters underground to detonate in order to not cause a chain reaction in the hive structure, and also to maximize the necessary killing power, wiping out all the Genestealers and the few remaining rebels." At this moment, Rockard, hearing Iron Man David's report, turned his head and glanced at the increasingly chaotic battlefield. He took a deep breath of the toxic air. Then, he said to Iron Man David without hesitation, "David, then go do it." "Ah, my lord, the reason I was late in supporting you is because I had already gone to the center of the battlefield and buried that micro-nuke." Iron Man David, wearing power armor, slightly shook his ceramite palm, which was covered in mud. He nodded to Rockard and said. Rockard, squinting his eyes, was slightly stunned at first. Then, he nodded vigorously with a grim smile. "Then what are we waiting for? David, you immediately call the others in the squad and run towards the Underhive exit. Dash 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 dash." Not long after, the remaining 20-odd members of the defense force, led by the Psyker Lucy and the veteran Hassan, detonated the last batch of ammunition and supplies. Only then did they barely break through the heavy encirclement of many Genestealers. Moreover, this was also because the ambush location initially chosen was relatively high. More Genestealers were temporarily unable to climb up. Otherwise, the entire decapitation squad probably wouldn't have survived with so many survivors. Fortunately, Rockard, driving the 6-armed Iron Knight, also led Iron Man David to meet the decapitation squad. After everyone had basically reached a safe range, Rockard unhesitatingly ordered Iron Man David to detonate the micro-nuke buried underground. Rumble rumble rumble, accompanied by the sudden and violent tremor that erupted on the ground, and the crackling falling rock fragments and large amounts of dust from above the Underhive. An extremely terrifying mushroom cloud actually rose into the air in the center of the battlefield. The constantly rolling, blazing firelight almost illuminated the entire Underhive. Emperor on Terra, did Redditus install the wrong yield, or did your calculation data go wrong, David? Why do I feel like the power of the nuke is too great? At this moment, Rockard, straining his eyes wide, stared at the huge mushroom cloud in the distance and couldn't help but shout loudly. Then, he immediately turned his head and shouted loudly to the crowd beside him, who were equally dumbfounded. "All teammates, listen to my command. Stop watching the spectacle. Run." Hearing Rockard's shout that resounded all around, the crowd, quickly regaining their senses, immediately ran desperately towards the Underhive exit. Even Rockard, wearing the 6-armed Iron Knight, wished he could grow a few more legs. And it was this kind of life or death crisis, still carrying a trace of absurd speechlessness, that made them run for their lives. It also inadvertently made Rockard, who was breathing heavily, figure out some things. "I understand. It must be that the industrial waste buried in the Underhive for countless years has produced an additional chemical reaction with the nuclear explosion. Emperor on Terra. Bad luck, bad luck, bad luck." The nearby ground was constantly trembling. Even the air in the Underhive seemed to be burning. Countless Genestealers and surviving rebels were completely vaporized into wisps of smoke and dust in the instant the nuclear explosion unfolded. As the aftereffects of the nuclear explosion completely ignited the industrial waste of the entire Underhive, A large number of terrifying underhive creatures cried out in despair, one after another. Soon after, the air in the underhive seemed to be completely burned out. Filled with a large amount of pitch-black poisonous mist that could not dissipate, it gradually spread towards the lower hive. Chi. Just at this moment, a powerful psychic energy from an unknown source descended into the interior of the underhive in the blink of an eye. It actually quickly eliminated the terrifying poisonous mist caused by the nuclear explosion and the continuous ground tremors, making the restless underhive calm down once again. At the same time, Rorschach and the others, who had desperately run out of the underhive's range, also looked back with lingering fear. A brilliant smile of relief unconsciously appeared on everyone's faces when Rorschach and Iron Man David looked at each other. After confirming that the nuclear explosion had not caused a large-scale tragedy such as the collapse of the Hive City, the two of them shook their heads in unison and let out a sigh of relief. Subsequently, Rorschach beckoned the members of the decapitation squad to walk towards the direction where the other reinforcements were located. At this moment, the battle in the lower hive had already ended long ago. A large number of decaying corpses of Nurgle zombies were gradually gathered into piles, and then completely burned into ashes by Prometheum flamethrowers. Because the battle was with chaos, those guardsmen and zealots who sacrificed and died were also dealt with in this way and buried on the spot. Immediately afterwards, many ecclesiarchy monks and mid-level priests who obeyed the orders of the Inquisition began to conduct the most basic screening and identification of the personnel who participated in the battle one by one. For example, splashing the other party with holy water that has been blessed by high-ranking priests for a long time, or asking the other party to recite prayer scriptures. Such behavior can not only cause considerable damage to chaos demons, but also may stimulate those chaos believers who are on the verge of corruption to make uncontrollable and violent resistance. Rorschach did not stop this, nor did he express any opinions. He knew the difficulty and trouble of chaos, and he also understood the reason why the ecclesiarchy priests acted in this way. Even if the soldiers who participated in this battle were combat heroes who successfully suppressed the rebellion and defended the Hive City, the taint of chaos does not reason with anyone or anything. Rorschach, who was splashed with countless holy water and listened to prayer scriptures, also finally passed the screening of the ecclesiarchy priests. With a blank expression, he was about to take the giant elevator to leave the lower hive. After thinking about it, he turned around and asked Iron Man David to take out all the Panacea's capsules on his body except for the Greater Panacea. Rorschach, driving the six-armed Iron Rider, found a high-ranking priest in charge of the screening operation. In front of the other party, he first showed the effect of the Panacea. Then, Rorschach threw a handful of Panacea capsules into the oversized holy water bucket that the other party brought. Iron Man David also began to beckon the soldiers who had undergone simple disinfection to come and drink the holy water. The reason why Rorschach chose to do this: one is to allow the personnel participating in the battle to recover from their injuries. The second is to eliminate possible Nurgle contamination, as well as to erase the ecclesiarchy and the Inquisition's worries or cruel methods. To some extent, Rock's support mission this time can be considered a complete success, except for the almost disastrous issue of the nuclear bomb at the end. The entire battle process was relatively smooth. However, his subsequent rectification of Hive Tertium has obviously only just begun. Especially after Inquisitor Grundle accidentally learned from some guardsmen and the Psyker Lucy that Rorschach, as an angel of the Emperor, actually had the Emperor's golden blood flowing through him. The other party chose to come to him for his opinion and suggestions on matters large and small. Knowing this well, Rorschach hesitated slightly. He also took advantage of the situation and became the temporary controller above the entire Hive City. Soon after, many Hive City civilians in the Mid-Hive and Upper Hive saw a grand scene that they had never seen before. Those nobles who used to be high above were actually hanged with their entire families in the most conspicuous display locations. And some Hive City civilians who were familiar with the nobles also accidentally discovered. In fact, these Hive City nobles who were executed all belonged to the faction of the planetary governor. In addition to some tyrannical nobles who were stained with the blood of countless civilians and caused serious public grievances. In addition, a large number of workers and civilians who participated in the Lehman Russ tank production mission also found that their living conditions had increased slightly. At least corpse starch was guaranteed to be full, and occasionally there would be some noble food that they had never seen before. After the people learned that it was the Angel Lord who personally issued the order, all of them were grateful and elated, constantly praising the Emperor and the Angel Lord. At this moment, Rorschach, hiding behind the scenes, truly became the uncrowned king of Hive Tertium. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Rorschach, who had controlled the noble class and the civilian class of the Hive City, also under the personal witness of Inquisitor Grundle, completely ended the seriously injured and dying life of that planetary governor. As time passed, a young planetary governor, said to be the planetary governor's illegitimate son, named Hassan, also entered the sight of the Hive City civilians for the first time, gradually taking over the difficult task of managing the entire Hive City. In fact, the so-called governor's illegitimate son is Cadian veteran Hassan. After all, the only requirement of the Imperium of Man for its subordinate planets is to pay the tithe on time, and other situations are basically not interfered with. Moreover, this is the governor candidate personally appointed by the Emperor's angel. In addition to the endorsement from the Inquisitor, no one can find any fault with it. Of course, this matter also had a great impact on veteran Hassan. He actually rose from a convict to become the governor of the entire Hive City planet, which is simply unimaginable. However, Rorschach also clearly told the other party, the reason for letting him take office is because he understands the civilians and the mortal warriors, able to make the lives of the Hive City civilians not too bad. If one day, planetary governor Hassan also becomes like the former one, or stands on the opposite side of the Imperium of Man, then, the Emperor's angel will descend again and personally take Hassan's head. At this moment, Hassan, whose expression changed from confusion to firmness, knelt on one knee to Rorschach without hesitation, expressing his strong loyalty to the Angel Lord, as a reward or a kind of insurance device. Rorschach also gave 3 tubes of the Emperor's blood extracted from his body to Hassan and the Psyker Lucy, as well as Inquisitor Grundle. When the matters of the Hive City were almost dealt with, Rorschach and Iron Man David also began to prepare to embark on the return journey. When the 30th day finally ended, a slowly tearing space crack quietly appeared in front of Rorschach and Iron Man David. Rorschach was surprised that he did not feel any uncontrollable powerful suction from the space crack. But in order not to miss the best passage to return, Rorschach, who finally stared at Hive Tertium, stepped into the space crack without hesitation with Iron Man David. Buzz buzz buzz, accompanied by a violent buzzing sound as space twisted and trembled. A spatial rift slowly tore open in the underground space deep within the Changzidao base. A few seconds later, Loxia, driving the 6-armed iron steed, and Iron Man David, clad in power armor, reappeared on the metal floor where they had departed. Before Loxia could turn his head to check, the spatial rift instantly vanished without a trace, as if it had never appeared. Ding! The next second, a palm-sized golden coin suddenly floated in front of Loxia. David, can you see this thing? At this moment, Loxia, squinting his eyes, suddenly asked Iron Man David, who had just taken off his metal helmet beside him. My lord, if I'm not mistaken, this should be a throne gelt enlarged several times, right? Iron Man David shook his metal head, his eye sockets flashing blue, and said, is this the miracle bestowed upon you by the Emperor? It's considered the basic reward for completing a support mission, since you can also see the throne gelt. David, I suddenly have an idea, forget it, I'll try it when I have a surplus of throne gelts. David, go hand over the design drawings of the Lehman Russ tank to Redditus first. Loxia, shaking his head slightly, reached out and caught the throne gelt rotating in front of him. In an instant, the golden throne gelt completely disappeared into his palm. And if there were no accidents, it should have been stored in the simulator's resource page. Hearing the order, Iron Man David bowed to Loxia. Then, he unhesitatingly passed through the encirclement of the Intelligent Control Legion. He walked directly towards a room outside the circular hall. That room contained a large amount of high-concentration disinfectant liquid. It was specially used to clean the power armor and many pieces of equipment on the body. This could also be considered an extra insurance device that Loxia added before heading to the Warhammer universe. Whether it worked or not, it was at least some peace of mind. Loxia also subconsciously opened the simulator. The first thing he checked was the Chaos God's sacrifice page. Huh? Loxia, widening his eyes, suddenly discovered. The time flow between the Warhammer universe and the native world was probably completely different. He had just spent a month in the Warhammer universe. But only 3 days had passed in the native world. Moreover, the most important thing was, when he was in the Warhammer universe, the sacred number of the Chaos Gods didn't seem to have changed at all. Does this mean I have to travel back and forth between the two universes for a long time? Or is there an additional factor that I don't know about when I'm in the Imperium of Man? Loxia, raising an eyebrow, turned and stared at the seemingly motionless Emperor statue. A fleeting smile subconsciously appeared on the corner of his mouth. In short, whether it was because of the Emperor or the Chaos God's bad taste, Loxia's future life would probably be inseparable from war. Afterwards, as if remembering something, Loxia quickly swiped the simulator's parchment. He found the diplomacy page, and as expected, the first diplomatic force appeared on it. Open black lens bracket Adoma Homeworld Tetham Hive City, Industrial, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Regional Reputation, Reverence close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Current Attitude, Loyalty close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Regional Leader, King Hassan close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Industrial Specialties, Lehman Russ Tank Constructible Atlas Recovery Tank under research close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Note. You can consume the reputation you have or the corresponding materials you hold to allow the Industrial Hive City to produce a certain number of armored vehicles. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Note. Please note that a large amount of consumed reputation may affect the stability and loyalty of the region. Please choose carefully. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Note. You can give the other party technological drawings that meet the current industrial level, but there is also a possibility of research failure. Please make a backup of the technological drawings. Close black lens bracket. At this moment, Loxia, with a smile on his face, couldn't help but nod his chin. This was one of the reasons why he wanted to control the entire Hive City before, and worked hard to push the veteran Hassan to the top. Even if the simulator's diplomacy page didn't acknowledge this event, it would just allow the civilians of the local Hive City to live a better life, and he himself didn't lose anything. However, the success of this plan also made Loxia, who was full of confidence, have some thoughts. He wanted to see if he could establish a good symbiotic relationship with other Imperial forces in subsequent support missions, so as to gradually weave a war behemoth belonging to him. Dash 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 dash. Loxia, full of excitement, casually closed the simulator's page. He drove the scarred six-armed iron steed towards the disinfection room. A team of automatic servo robots stationed in the tunnel immediately followed behind him, ready to dismantle the Terminator armor at any time. Soon after, Loxia, baring his teeth, endured the pungent odor and intense burning sensation of the disinfectant liquid, and thoroughly washed his body. When Loxia stood in front of a mirror, he suddenly noticed that he seemed to have been maintaining the physical characteristics of Omegan. Loxia took a deep breath and closed his eyes slightly. When he reopened his eyes, the appearance of the gray-haired wolf child returned once again. However, Loxia, whose playfulness rose, did not choose to end it. He calmly stared at the clear reflection in the mirror. He wanted to try to control the skin tissues all over his body to transform towards the appearance of Governor Hassan. Unfortunately, those skin tissues that wriggled like plasticine ultimately did not succeed. It's probably still not enough proficiency. I'll continue to maintain Omegan's identity in future support missions. What if I accidentally attract the Alpha Legion or Omegan himself? Forget it, I'll deal with that special situation when it happens. I can't even tell whether Omegan is a loyalist or not, if possible, I'll tie him up and let the Emperor himself judge. However, that's just me thinking about it. It's very difficult to go head-to-head with a Primarch. Loxia, you have to work hard too." Loxia stared at the reflection in the mirror. Slowly shook his head. Subsequently, the feeling of fatigue gradually increased, and he couldn't help but yawn. In the 30 days of carrying out the support mission, the vigilant Loxia had hardly slept, completely relying on nerve ganglia to adjust his energy. Now that he had returned to a safe environment, all the fatigue swept over him. Loxia, struggling to open his eyes wide, quickly wiped his body. He turned and walked out of the disinfection room, heading quickly towards the private room in the base. "Even if there's a big deal, I'll wait until I wake up." At this moment, Loxia, whose vision was beginning to blur, once again mustered his spirits. He muttered to himself, when a refreshed and clear-headed Roche awoke from his slumber. Nearly a dozen hours had passed. He first went to the training grounds of the Changzi Island base to complete his daily warm-up exercises. Then, he turned and headed to the base hall, intending to deal with the accumulated business. However, before Roche could reach there, an automatic servo robot, waving its mechanical tentacles, blocked his path. "Reditus requests my presence." "Understood." Roche, his eyes narrowed, slightly shook his head. He thought for a moment and temporarily changed his route. He headed towards the kitchen area of the gang dogs. Soon after, Roche, holding a large amount of food in his hand, ate heartily. While heading towards the direction of the Sizzy Island, as soon as Roche stepped into the bustling forge hall, Reditus, driven by its anti-gravity engine, flew towards him. "Respected Primarch, I have received the Lehman Russ tank design drawings that David sent, but the production line for the Thunderhawk transport is currently being set up, and there are not many people available at the moment, unless we increase the number of robots again." Hearing Reditus's words, Roche, who was chewing, swallowed the last bite of food and shook his head, saying, "The Lehman Russ tank is not needed for the time being, so there is no rush to put it on the production line. Even if there are special circumstances, I have a way to temporarily transfer a few over. For now, the Thunderhawk transport, which increases the base's transport capacity, is more important." "Reditus, did you call me here just for this matter? Don't you have a communicator?" As soon as Roche finished speaking, Reditus, its eye sockets flashing red, floated up and down a few times, and said in a hurried tone, "Primarch, of course, it's not just this small matter. After a long period of unremitting effort with the Mechanicus Scion Doom, we have finally repaired several ship-borne void shields from the space derelict, and successfully connected them in parallel to become a super-large void shield with a larger protection area, which can be used for the defense facilities of the Twin Islands. But this has created a small problem. There is something you may not be aware of. Usually, void shields that use warp technology can distort the local space of the impact point to achieve defense against ranged attacks. That is to say, in addition to a part of the energy-based attacks that are directly neutralized by the void shield, most of the damage will be transferred to the warp. However, coincidentally, after our repeated tests, the void shield can actually be used smoothly in the native world, but I remember you said that this universe does not have a warp, right? Then where has the damage sustained by the void shield been transferred to?" Reditus's words temporarily put Roche into a state of contemplation. But then, he raised his head and said to the other party, "Reditus, I know what you are worried about. The nature of the warp is the reflection of the universe itself, two sides of the same coin. If the void shield can be used, then it proves that the native world also has similar spatial dimensions. However, there should be no chaos-like existence there, and the dimensional dimensions of the native world are probably as numerous as the hairs of an ox. With the little damage transferred by our void shield, it shouldn't cause any waves, right? Ah, thank you, Primarch, for dispelling my worries and doubts. I will have the automatic servo robot go to Changzi Island to install the void shield as soon as possible." Reditus, driven by its anti-gravity engine, turned back and forth in midair several times. It continued to say to Roche, "By the way, Primarch, we have also made considerable progress in our research on alien teleportation technology. Although we have never figured out the principle of teleportation technology, it does not prevent us from applying teleportation technology. Moreover, from my tens of thousands of biological teleportation experiments, the safety level of this alien technology is probably more reliable than the teleportation technology of the human empire. Even if the teleportation fails due to various factors, it will not completely fuse the creature with the coordinates of the location. At this moment, Rorschach blinked his eyes. He pondered slightly and said softly, "My requirements for teleportation technology are very simple, that is, to ensure safety while being more careful and cautious, because my idea is to connect the bases in Latveria and Dongying through teleportation technology to facilitate mobilization, and more bases in other places will join in the future. Therefore, once this alien technology becomes an indispensable means of convenient transportation for us, then we need 100% control. I don't want the lifeline of the entire base to be arbitrarily pinched when facing this unknown alien." Rock's serious words made Reditus's yellowed skull hover in midair. Its eye sockets flashed red, and it said helplessly, "Understood, Primarch, I will continue to research with Doom. To be honest, I am full of confidence in Mechanicus Scion Doom. If he had grown up in the Adeptus Mechanicus, then the day when Mechanicus Scion becomes a Grand Magos would not be far away. Perhaps Doom, who is more concerned about alien technology, can bring us some different surprises. Oh, and one last thing, we are currently studying other equipment based on the characteristics of Antarctic vibranium, such as electronic muscle bundles made of Antarctic vibranium, but unfortunately the progress is indeed a bit slow. Moreover, I also accidentally learned from the internet that there is also a primitive vibranium in the native world, which is said to be able to arbitrarily stop the vibration between molecules, that is to say, it can absorb kinetic energy and is indestructible. Primarch, please imagine, if you could have a speed-type power armor cast from primitive vibranium, plus the electronic muscle bundles of Antarctic vibranium, bringing power and even explosive power far exceeding the past. This is not only very consistent with your noble status as a Primarch but also allows you to obtain more powerful combat capabilities." Hearing Reditus's tempting words, Rorschach, narrowing his eyes slowly, glanced at the other party and said, "Reditus, just say you want a sample of primitive vibranium, there's no need to beat around the bush. As far as I know, the country with the largest amount of primitive vibranium is Wakanda, located on the African continent. Although I don't want to provoke them for the time being, there are also many accidentally leaked vibranium items around the world. I will have David collect them for you. As for how many there are, that is not known." At this moment, Reditus, having obtained Rock's permission, quickly drove the anti-gravity engine to dance up and down. The red light in its eye sockets kept flashing, and it shouted loudly in an excited tone, "Thank you very much, generous Primarch. In this way, my determination to strive for the team is even more firm and vigorous. Omnizea be praised, for the Emperor, and even more for Rorschach. Shut up. Get to work." The operation of the Gemini Island base returned to normal once again. Luo Sha supervised and personally led the gang dogs to continue honing their will and physique. Reditasa and the increasingly strong Doom also devoted themselves to absorbing and researching various technologies. Because the tedious tasks in the base were basically taken over by the shipboard machine spirit Cortana. Therefore, Iron Man David also had plenty of time to remotely command the three forces of Latveria, East Ying, and Imperial Heavy Industries, and constantly adjust their development. Now, the most idle individuals in the entire Gemini Island base. I'm afraid it's the elusive Power Gauntlet and Jessica, who struts around carrying the power scythe. Even Teacher Connors, who is in charge of researching the Gene Seed project, is so busy every day that he often forgets to eat. Seemingly unable to bear Jessica's hippie-like, smiling, and dissolute image. So, under the affectionate gaze of a large group of gang dogs, the expressionless Luo Sha personally took to the field. He beat Jessica, who knew nothing about the power scythe, to the ground with his bare hands. Then, the bruised and swollen Jessica completely became a highlight of the gang dog's daily special training, especially when she wailed with broken arms and legs. In addition, Jessica's training course also added combat skills for the power scythe. Strict teacher Luo Sha personally taught and beat her up until she was completely proficient. Just as Luo Sha was thinking that he had rested almost enough. When he was about to start the next simulation, Reditasa's automatic servo robot messenger came to the door again, notifying him of an important message. The production line for the Thunderhawk transport aircraft has been completed. The first locally produced Thunderhawk transport aircraft has been newly manufactured. So, Luo Sha could only temporarily close the simulator. He lowered his head and thought, and began to select suitable transport aircraft pilots from the gang dogs. Regarding this matter, Reditasa's suggestion was to install the cogitator system on the Thunderhawk transport aircraft, so that the flying vehicle can drive autonomously. Luo Sha's idea was to let the gang dogs learn to fly the flying vehicle first. After all, the cogitator system is not omnipotent. It cannot surpass the flying skills of an experienced pilot. So, a unique pilot selection event kicked off on Gemini Island. As for Luo Sha's selection method, it was very simple. Personnel who like flying vehicles and have similar experience are given priority for employment. However, Luo Sha forgot one important thing. If the gang dogs loved to study since childhood, they would not have become gang members. 24 hours later, only 4 people came to Luo Sha to sign up. These 4 people also included the energetic Doom and the timid Jessica. In other words, only 2 people really wanted to learn driving skills. Even if the stormtrooper squad is forced to learn, there are only 9 candidates in total. Thinking that only 9 people were selected from the hundreds of people in the Gemini Island base, the expressionless Luo Sha almost laughed out of anger. Just as he was planning to let Doom, who quickly learned driving skills, take the time to write a suitable textbook. When selecting pilots from the National Defense Forces Resistance Army selected from Latveria, an unexpected candidate came to him. At this moment, Luo Sha, squinting his eyes, stared at Natasha Romanov, who had tied up her red ponytail, and temporarily fell into a strange silence. After a long time, he opened his mouth to the other party and said, "Ms. Natasha, as a captured agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., do you think your life is too free? And why do you think I would let you come into contact with the flying vehicles we produce?" Hearing Luo Sha's sarcastic words, Natasha, with a faint smile on the corner of her mouth, did not back down. She stared at Luo Sha in front of her and said with interest, "I am considered one of the best pilots in S.H.I.E.L.D. I am proficient in almost all flying vehicles, and I can quickly get started with any model. Moreover, I am also an old pilot who has experienced various battlefields. Any thrilling and exciting flying environment cannot defeat me. Isn't this more reassuring than those novice pilots in your hands?" Natasha's words made Luo Sha subconsciously widen his eyes. He stared at the other party expressionlessly and sneered. "Hee, it is because of this that I am even more worried. Ms. Natasha, this is not discrimination based on occupation and gender. You are a spy agent, and you also know some secrets of our base, especially the geographical location. How can you make me believe that you will not take the opportunity to escape? To be honest, if S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't still have some use, I would have launched a decapitation operation against Nick Fury and other senior agents long ago, and you are also one of the targets." However, as soon as Luo Sha finished speaking, the faint smile on the corner of Natasha's mouth still did not disappear. She looked at Luo Sha solemnly and said softly, "Mr. Luo Sha, if you are worried about me, I can fully accept the brainwashing program, and even be willing to carry restrictive measures such as explosive collars. Why? You should know that the brainwashing technology I have is not mature, and there is a huge risk that the experimental personnel will become demented, right? Ms. Natasha, in the face of this level of risk, are you still willing to pay for S.H.I.E.L.D.? Is all this worth it?" It seemed that Natasha's sincere words made Luo Sha put away his contemptuous attitude. He straightened his back expressionlessly and asked Natasha in front of him, "S.H.I.E.L.D. No, Mr. Luo Sha, I think you misunderstood. Since Mr. David found me a lot of real information about S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury, that leader who treated me like a father in the past has died in my heart. I once thought that coming to the so-called free world, changing an organization and country to serve, I could do some good things, make up for the mistakes I made in the past, and become a truly good person. But I was wrong. I found that S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Red Room, even Hydra, have never been much different. If it was initially because of the healing of the panacea that made me curious about the scientific and technology you control and had selfish ideas to take it for myself, then, after Latveria was liberated by you, I also learned from Mr. David about the earth-shaking changes in the lives of the local people. I once arrogantly thought that you were just another ambitious villainous organization, but later I found that I was really wrong. If you put aside those killing methods that are too cruel, your behavior is indeed working for a better future for mankind. So, if you think that everything I am saying now is just to find out information and please shield, then you really underestimate the ideological pattern of a woman and a spy agent. Now, I want to truly and completely transform into a good person, a hero remembered by others, and a liberator who ends the painful lives of more Red Room sisters. With his keen senses, Luo Sha was able to confirm that Natasha was not lying. There were no issues with her heartbeat or breathing patterns. Although this was just basic skill, a piece of cake for a seasoned spy. However, Luo Sha pondered for a moment and decided to trust her for the time being. Soon after, accompanied by the sound of approaching footsteps, Iron Man David, shaking his metal head, arrived in front of the two. And under Luo Sha's silent gaze, Natasha, with a smile, began to hand over her pledge of allegiance to Iron Man David, including the locations of SHIELD bases throughout the Americas and around the world. A list of some senior agents, as well as important information such as sleeper agents known to Natasha. For example, the SHIELD headquarters known as the Hub. It was a command center that gathered intelligence, formulated combat strategies, and issued battle orders. If a war were to break out with SHIELD, this would be the first place that needed to be destroyed. And the places that Luo Sha was more interested in were the secret bases called Slingshot and the Fridge. The Slingshot base was specifically responsible for launching special dangerous items that could not be destroyed by ordinary means. Loaded into rockets and launched towards the sun for destruction. The Fridge base was where SHIELD stored many large dangerous items that could not be loaded onto rockets, as well as dangerous items that were less dangerous and still had value. In other words, SHIELD possessed many alien technologies of unknown origin or shrouded in mystery, some of which might have the destructive power to endanger the entire world. If he wanted to deal with SHIELD, then he could only act quickly, decapitating all of their high-ranking commanders. However, with Natasha's defection and joining, Luo Sha also vaguely had the idea of taking over the entire SHIELD organization. Instead of being infiltrated by Hydra or simply destroyed, it would be better to truly shine for the future of humanity. Dash 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 dash. Luo Sha did not choose to put Natasha through a brainwashing program. Firstly, the current brainwashing device was too dangerous, and Redditus and the others could not spare the time to thoroughly study it. Secondly, Luo Sha always believed that trust and respect were the basis of combat effectiveness. Since the other party had first expressed goodwill, then he would do the same. However, to be more cautious, Luo Sha also ordered Redditus to temporarily create a remote-controlled explosive bracelet with an Antarctic vibranium shell, to be worn on Natasha's arm. And the explosion authority was given to Iron Man David, to facilitate monitoring Natasha's every move. Subsequently, Luo Sha solemnly welcomed Natasha to join his team. Natasha, with a relaxed smile on her face, began to tell Luo Sha about some of her past experiences, including the spy organization that trained her into a killing machine, the Red Room, as well as the true origin of Natasha's title, Black Widow. In fact, Black Widow was not just Natasha's code name. It actually referred to the female super agent that the Red Room produced only one of each year. And according to Natasha's description, the specific screening method was to throw a group of underage women who had completed all their training into the Siberian wilderness, to conduct a battle royale where it was kill or be killed, and the last survivor would be the Black Widow. And this seemed to have become a nightmare that Natasha could not shake off. There are currently about 10 Black Widows who are still active around the world. Whether it is combat ability or intelligence gathering ability, they are no less than me, and the women who have not yet completed training in the Red Room are also valuable human resources. And from my professional perspective, our team needs such a qualified team of agents to handle both counter-espionage and the collection of important intelligence. Mr. David is professional, but the intelligence of many organizations has never been chosen to flow into the network, and is basically preserved on paper. Sorry, David, this is not aimed at you. Natasha smiled at Iron Man David, who was standing next to her. Then, she turned her gaze and stared at Luo Sha in front of her and asked. So, leader, or rather, Primarch, what are your thoughts? My thoughts. Luo Sha, narrowing his eyes, raised an eyebrow and said faintly. I think the Stormtrooper squad should also participate in some outdoor activities. I will approve you to carry out a raid on the Red Room, as well as the mission to capture the other, Black Widows, alive. David will be responsible for coordinating everything for you. Natasha, I'll say the ugly things first, this is your only chance to prove your loyalty. Don't let me down, understand? Hearing Luo Sha's indifferent tone, Natasha, whose expression had completely returned to solemnity, took a deep breath. She nodded heavily to Luo Sha and said, Don't worry, Mr. Luo Sha, even for the sake of the sisters in the Red Room, I will not betray your team. Dash 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 dash. 3 days later, Natasha, who had basically mastered the piloting skills of the Thunderhawk transport, began to formulate the mission route and the strategies required for the operation with Iron Man David. And the Stormtrooper squad, wearing auxiliary power armor, also led a team of Carnifex mechs, waiting on the landing platform. They were checking their bolters and chainswords, ready to board the Thunderhawk transport and carry out the raid mission. Of course, Luo Sha did not choose to join Natasha's operation. This was not only a test for Natasha, but also a trial for the Stormtrooper squad. They possessed weapons and equipment far exceeding the current level of technology. Coupled with their battle-hardened combat abilities, using them to deal with a group of spy agents was simply as easy as using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. However, Luo Sha also secretly issued an order to Gao Qi and the others. If Natasha showed any signs of being wrong, or led everyone into a trap-filled encirclement, then he allowed the Stormtrooper squad to use all means to end the other party's life, and to massacre the enemy. Soon after, Natasha, who had put on her black leather armor again, came to the landing platform with a serious expression. She nodded to Luo Sha, and then immediately led the Stormtrooper squad onto the Thunderhawk transport. And after the Thunderhawk transport, with its roaring engines, slowly took off. Luo Sha, with his arms crossed, turned around and returned to his private room. Subsequently, he sat cross-legged on the metal bed and began to adjust his breathing rhythm and state of mind. Luo Sha planned to take the opportunity to conduct the next simulation. I wonder if the first simulation after the simulator update will bring any unknown changes. Or will it remain unchanged? May the Emperor protect me. The next moment, Luo Sha, who was silently pondering, did not hesitate to open the parchment page of the simulator. After he casually pressed the simulation option of the Golden Throne, Luo Sha seemed to hear a crisp and pleasant sound of a coin turning in his ear. Ding! Open black lens bracket simulation initiating, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket currently possessing identity, Space Wolves Bloodclaw Webway Comorig Death Arena in battle close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket please select a landing identity close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket if refused, will randomly land close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket selection of identity refused close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket simulation initiating, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you have landed in the Warhammer universe close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket time, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket location, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you have successfully landed behind a giant rock cover, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you find yourself wearing a set of dark green power armor, with a white hooded robe over the ceramite shell, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket in your palm, you also firmly grip a ready-to-fire bolter. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were just about to turn your helmet's visor to observe the surrounding environment. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Suddenly, you hear intense bolter fire and intermittent battle roars in your ears. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In an instant, slender, crystal clear projectiles like crystals swiftly assault from above. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Without hesitation, you activate your power armor and dodge forward. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket accompanied by a crisp and pleasant collision sound. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Eldar's unique shuriken ammunition is firmly embedded in your thick shoulder armor, making you look like a crystal hedgehog. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You quickly raise your head to search for the enemy's trail. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A raider bike suddenly cutting through the air is being controlled by a dark Eldar in black armor, diving past your field of vision. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Without thinking, you raise the bolter in your palm and firmly lock onto the opponent's slender, strange black helmet. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Boom boom boom. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Countless explosions of bolter fire immediately blast the Dark Eldar off the raider bike. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As the unmanned raider bike crashes to the ground, the blood-soaked Dark Eldar in black armor also falls directly onto the nearby ground. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In the next moment, before the dazed opponent can get up to counterattack, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You draw an ancient-looking, broad power sword from your power armor's waist and swiftly launch a terrifying charge towards the Dark Eldar in front. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You wield the broad power sword, activating the disruption field, and easily chop off the Dark Eldar's slender helmet along with his entire head in one swing. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You take a deep breath. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You gaze at the alien corpse spouting foul-smelling blood and immediately turn around to assess the battlefield situation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In this barren area covered with giant rocks, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A tactical squad of only 5 people, including you, is engaging in a fierce confrontation with a Dark Eldar raiding party. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You also immediately recognize the Astartes chapter of this landing. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. First Legion. Dark Angels. You utter a muttered sound from your mouth subconsciously. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You stupid recruit. Don't just stand there. Pick up your weapon and bring unforgettable repentance to this bunch of bastards. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, a dark angel who suddenly turns to face you shouts out with agitated emotion. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. And you also judge from his state and tone that he is clearly the leader of this tactical squad. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Without hesitation, you nod heavily towards him and then quickly focus your mind and enter a battle state. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You suddenly raise the bolter in your palm, hold the broad power sword in your other palm, and drive the power armor to launch a charge towards the Dark Eldar on the battlefield. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In fact, even without your addition, this small raiding party would not have lasted much longer. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. When you, like a dark green rampaging train, forcefully endure the impact of countless shuriken projectiles and charge into the center of the Dark Eldar's ranks. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A cruel and swift bloody massacre instantly unfolds before the other Dark Angels. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Every time you wield the power sword, it takes away a Dark Eldar's life. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You also use the bolter, which fires from time to time, and the nimble footwork under your feet to repeatedly interrupt or dodge close combat attacks from alien enemies. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket until you once again wield the broad power sword emitting a bluish-blue disruption field and chop off the head of the last Dark Eldar. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The bolter fire throughout the battlefield completely ceases, and 8 eyes from the Dark Angels firmly focus on your tall body through the visor. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Damn recruit. My order was for you to assist the tactical squad in annihilating this bunch of pointy ears. Not to show off your training results at the risk of being surrounded. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, at this moment, the Dark Angel, whose walking pace and tone are filled with anger and a bit of madness, walks towards you and shouts loudly at you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Captain, right. I have completed your order. If I heard correctly, you just said, bring unforgettable repentance to this bunch of bastards. I think I have exceeded your requirements. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You slightly shake your dark green helmet and say to the other party in a tone that is neither humble nor arrogant. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Huh. Who gave you the guts to dare to talk back to me, you recruit? Do you know that your series of actions just now constitutes battlefield disobedience? Do you believe that I will make you repent to me on the spot? Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, the unfamiliar Dark Angel standing in front of you shouts loudly and relentlessly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. His ceramite palm repeatedly waves past your helmet visor. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Even the movements are full of rudeness and rashness, which makes the other person reveal an indescribable state of madness. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The brow hidden inside your helmet furrows slightly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your first impression of the Dark Angel's Legion quickly decreases a lot. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Who gave me the guts? It's the Emperor and the Primarch. Whether it's the Codex Astartes or the Dark Angels chapter regulations, I'm afraid it doesn't give a tactical squad's captain such transgressive power, does it? Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your gaze pierces through the visor and stares straight at the other party as you speak. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Moreover, you, as the commander, treat a battle brother who has just achieved victory like this. Then you are really not a qualified squad captain. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, your sarcastic and indifferent response seems to make the unfamiliar Dark Angel's anger surge rapidly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. He forcefully shakes the dark green helmet hidden under the white hood and subconsciously waves the 2 ceramite palms that have just hung up his weapons a few times. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. What? Did I expose your fragile dignity? Planning to fight me? Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You move backwards a few steps alertly and distance yourself from the other party. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The broad power sword firmly gripped in your palm is also slightly raised upwards, revealing the blood-stained sharp blade. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, at this moment, the other Dark Angels in the tactical squad quickly gather around. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. They all step forward to separate you, who is full of explosive tension, and that Dark Angel who seems to be trembling all over. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Enough. Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai. After this operation is over, I will report your current actions to Chapter Master Azrael again. You have once again shown other battle brothers your crude and ignorant base character, and also revealed that you are not a qualified squad commander. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. One of the Dark Angels in the tactical squad steps forward and says to the interrogator chaplain named Asmodai in a deep voice. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Then, the other party slightly turns his dark green metal helmet and nods while gazing in your direction. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Recruit, you have successfully obtained all the glory of this battle. While I offer you praise, I also apologize to you for Asmodai's base behavior. You and the other brothers go to check on the civilians captured by the pointy ears. I think Asmodai needs to calm down. close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket, no problem, battle brother, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You nod towards the other party's metal helmet and turn around and leave without hesitation, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket, interrogator chaplain Asmodai. I think I vaguely remember who he is. A madman who is the most annoying in the Dark Angels chapter. How did I encounter this guy, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. While rehanging the power sword and bolter in your palm, you mutter to yourself, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket, may the Emperor protect us, don't let him cause me any more trouble, otherwise, close black lens bracket. You, encased in your dark green power armor, approached a raider anti-gravity skiff, its overall shape resembling a rhomboid block. Before you even got close, you saw it clearly through your helmet's visor. Naked men, women, and children were impaled through their fragile human bodies by gleaming, sharp iron hooks, hanging from the ship's outer railings. You immediately beckoned a dark angel following behind you to step forward. Together, you began carefully rescuing the human civilians captured by the Drukhari. However, the Dark Eldar's characteristically reckless cruelty, combined with the arid environment's sun and wind, had taken its toll. Nearly all of the human civilians had become cold, stiff corpses. In the end, out of more than 50 human civilians, you only managed to rescue 3. Moreover, even if they didn't receive the necessary medical treatment, they would likely not survive the desert environment's extreme temperature fluctuations. You gazed down at the mass grave you had just unearthed, at a young boy and girl whose small hands were still tightly clasped together in death. Your teeth ground together within your tightly closed mouth. Once again, hatred and anger towards alien races, especially the Drukhari, surged within you. At that moment, the Dark Angel veteran standing beside you seemed to sense your inner thoughts. But the veteran remained silent, refraining from offering comfort, only raising a ceramite gauntlet to gently pat your thick shoulder plate. You couldn't help but grip the hilt of your broad power sword tightly. You, still in your power armor, found the Dark Angel veteran sergeant who had temporarily relieved Asmodai of his command. In a low voice, you asked the new squad leader how to accommodate the 3 surviving human civilians. You stared intently at the veteran sergeant, temporarily ignoring the insane giggling that Asmodai was subconsciously emitting near your ear. Recruit, we have no way to help them. The nearest human settlement is hundreds of kilometers away, and we only have a land speeder and an attack bike. To continue tracking those pointy ears and to ensure the safety of other human settlements, we cannot turn back. The veteran sergeant paused for a moment before speaking to you with complete frankness. You were rendered speechless. You could only silently shake your metal helmet. You, encased in your power armor, turned and walked towards the 3 barely alive human civilians. You looked down at the faintly breathing humans and slowly drew your ancient, broad power sword from your hip. Just then, among the 3 human civilians, a female, her lips cracked and bleeding, her expression withered, seemed to be experiencing a final moment of lucidity. She barely raised her drooping, emaciated head, opening a pair of crystalline, clouded purple eyes. Her blurred vision seemed to focus on your raised, sharp blade. "Thank you, please, help me," she murmured in a tone of release. Just when you thought she might beg for her life or ramble incoherently. Her completely unexpected words made your massive arm freeze in midair, as if unable to swing the power sword down. Your breathing became noticeably heavier. You took a deep breath and shook your metal helmet. "May your souls return to the Emperor's side and find eternal peace," you said to her in a low voice, then unhesitatingly plunged the power sword down. You ended the fragile lives of the 3 human civilians, reburying their bodies. None of the Dark Angels present interfered with your actions, they chose to wait quietly for it to end. When you turned around, carrying the blood-stained power sword in your gauntlet, and walked towards the squad vehicles. Insane babble from Asmodai made you slam on your mag boots, kicking up a cloud of dry dust. Tisk, 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 this is why I hate new recruits. These little guys' minds are too fragile. It's a waste of time. We shouldn't have bothered saving these civilians, he seemed to be muttering to himself nonsensically, yet his tone was clearly directed at you with malicious intent. The next moment, you abruptly turned your helmet, the blood-stained power sword in your gauntlet pointing directly at Asmodee's dark green helmet. Asmodee, do you want to die? You said slowly, each word distinct and low. Recruit, lower your weapon. The ancient power sword, representing honor and faith, must not be pointed at our battle brothers. And you, Asmodee, shut your foul mouth. The veteran sergeant's stern reprimand broke the tense atmosphere between the two of you. It also made you slowly lower the broad power sword in your gauntlet. Without turning back, you, in your power armor, moved away from the land speeder where Asmodee was and headed towards the driver's seat of the attack bike. After you casually started the attack bike's engine. Amid the roar of the engine, the Dark Angel veteran sitting in the sidecar suddenly said to you in a low voice. Brother recruit, Asmodee is a madman. The better you perform, the more jealous and envious he becomes. If he didn't always pass the chaplain's repeated examinations, I'd think he was corrupted by chaos. In short, it's best not to take him seriously. Afterwards, we'll work together to slaughter those raiding Dark Eldar scum and avenge the dead human civilians. You slightly tilted the metal helmet beneath your white hood, saying to him without looking back, if Asmodee just deserves a beating, then the Dark Eldar simply deserve to die. You violently twisted the throttle of the attack bike with your ceramite hand. Accompanied by the deafening roar of the engine repeatedly echoing, the three heavy rubber tires quickly grinded against the arid, chaotic surface, kicking up a cloud of dust. At the same time, the land speeder carrying three Dark Angels hovered into the air, whistling past over your head. During the first month, your Dark Angel tactical squad spent most of its time on the long journey. On this alien planet, which more closely resembled a death world, the daytime temperature could reach 50 or 60 degrees Celsius, while the nighttime temperature could drop to minus 20 degrees Celsius. The shift between day and night was even more drawn out, with the daytime lasting as long as 35 hours, and the nighttime even more unbearable. Even so, many human settlements had stubbornly survived here. Moreover, for the human civilians here, if environmental factors could be gradually overcome through willpower and technological capabilities, then the Dark Eldar's slaughter and looting, which they called the Black Scourge, was a terrifying nightmare from which countless humans could never escape. Not long after, your tactical squad encountered a raiding party of Dark Eldar once again. This alien race, which takes pleasure in defiling any living thing and can barely survive by absorbing the souls of others, was in the midst of a ruthless capture operation, leaving no blade of grass untouched in a human settlement. Everyone in your tactical squad rapidly prepared for battle amidst Asmodee's mad laughter. Heavy bolter fire from the attack bike's sidecar erupted in a deafening roar. A Raider-class anti-gravity skiff, unable to evade in time, was immediately engulfed in the explosive flames and crashed to the ground. At the same time, the plasma storm cannon of the land speeder Vengeance unleashed a rapid-fire barrage, relentlessly bombarding the leaping and bounding Dark Eldar. You drove the attack bike, like a streak of dark green lightning, into the rubble-strewn human settlement. The broad power sword, which you had gripped in your palm beforehand, slashed through the black armor of several Dark Eldar warriors, cleaving open their tall, resilient, and slender bodies. Just then, a Dark Eldar hedonist, wielding a splendor pistol and a torturer's power whip, leapt towards you like a bouncing ball. You slammed on the brakes of the attack bike, the heavy rubber tires emitting a pungent odor, and simultaneously drew your bolter from your hip, opening fire on the opponent's narrow helmet. However, a web grenade, thrown from an unknown location, detonated behind your power pack, and countless soft, snow-white threads rapidly expanded, entangling the rear of the attack bike in your body. Although the Dark Eldar's web grenade caused no harm or effect to living beings, the attack bike you were driving was completely wrecked, and even your power armor seemed to have entered a state of temporary malfunction. You abruptly raised a ceramite hand and slapped the side of the power pack forcefully. Your power armor instantly returned to normal operation. You and the Dark Angel veteran in the sidecar leapt off the attack bike in perfect coordination. The veteran fired his bolter at the surrounding Dark Eldar warriors, while you faced the approaching Dark Eldar hedonist with your broad power sword. Crack, accompanied by the ear-splitting sound of disrupting force fields interacting. You swiftly parried the incoming torturer's power whip with your raised broad power sword, but the soft tip of the whip struck heavily against your thick shoulder armor, already covered in cracks. The power whip shattered the ceramite plating and penetrated almost into the interior of the power armor, touching your flesh. A wave of extreme pain, as if penetrating into the marrow of your bones, rapidly surged from your shoulder. Your eyes widened abruptly, and you couldn't help but let out an angry roar. Roar. Enduring the tidal wave of pain, you raised the bolter in your other hand and pressed it directly against the hedonist's black chest armor, forcefully pulling the trigger. Bang, bang, bang. The opponent's black armor could not withstand the terrifying power of the bolter fired at close range. The entire chest, including the solid spine, was blasted into a spray of flesh and blood. You also swung the broad power sword, cleaving down upon the hedonist's narrow helmet. However, just as you were planning to join forces with the Dark Angel veteran to continue clearing the Dark Eldar from the depths of the human settlement streets. All Dark Angels, assemble to me. This is the squad's highest order. An order from the communication channel caused you to temporarily halt your advance. You took a deep breath. Gazing through your lenses at the human civilians suffering horrific treatment, you tightened your grip on the broad power sword in your palm. You endured the lingering pain and burning sensation in your shoulder, while struggling to suppress the rising anger in your heart. You bent down, picked up the splinter pistol and torturer's power whip, and casually placed them behind your waist. You chose to fight and retreat with the Dark Angel veteran beside you, running towards the land speeder Vengeance. After you successfully arrived there, you saw a middle-aged man, dressed like the administrator of the human settlement, or rather, the village chief, sitting on the ground, still in shock. At the same time, the other Dark Angels had withdrawn from the current battlefield and were exchanging important information. Sergeant, why did you order us to retreat? If we don't take the opportunity to wipe out these pointy ears, how many more innocent human civilians will suffer? You growled softly at the veteran sergeant in a stiff tone. Recruit, watch your tone. We have just received important information about the suspected presence of fallen angels. This is the sole duty that we Dark Angels are born with. Therefore, this is a necessary and difficult trade-off. The veteran sergeant slightly turned his dark green helmet, staring in your direction as he spoke in a deep voice. Does that mean we're just going to ignore these human civilians in front of us, and the Xenos that are wreaking havoc? You gripped the broad power sword in your palm tightly, shouting loudly. Our duty as Astartes is to fight to the death for humanity and the Emperor. But this is the Dark Angels. Recruit, if you refuse to fulfill your sole duty, then you will be marked by the chapter as a disgraceful deserter, or even, in short, you will suffer a terrible punishment that you cannot endure. The Dark Angel veteran who had cooperated with you stepped forward immediately. He raised a ceramite hand and placed it on your shattered shoulder armor, wanting to soothe your agitated emotions. However, at this moment, the pain from the injured shoulder, like maggots gnawing at the bone, and the molten fury in the center of your chest, almost caused you to lose your remaining sanity. Deserter. An Astartes who is loyal to his duty will actually be judged as a deserter for this. How laughable, these Dark Angels, and the detestable Lionel Johnson. If the most ancient First Legion is full of such filth, then I don't want to stay in this chapter. Sooner or later, I will grab Lion by the head and personally ask him why his descendants have fallen to such a pathetic state. Your almost heretical and insane words plunged all the Dark Angels present into an eerie silence, as if they were completely shocked by your audacity. Bold. You dare to insult the Primarch of the First Legion. You must be a damned heretic. Speak. Are you colluding with the fallen angels? Perhaps you are a fallen angel who has infiltrated the chapter. A sharp shout from Asmodai instantly broke the heavy atmosphere between everyone. In the next moment, power swords still stained with Xeno's blood were instantly drawn, and the sole target of everyone gripping their weapons was you, whose breathing was becoming increasingly labored. Repent. Fallen angel, tomorrow you die. The mad Asmodai shouted at you with ecstatic joy. Thank you for your support. Your ceramite steel hand clenched tightly around the broad power sword in your grip. Hey, didn't you Dark Angels say that power weapons, representing honor and faith, would never be pointed at a battle brother? You exhaled slowly, sneering. For Lion, you damned fallen angel, reveal all your secrets, then cry, scream, and desperately repent. Just then, Asmodai, having raised his power sword, let out a deep, guttural battle cry. He quickly stepped forward, launching an attack in your direction. Without hesitation, you raised the broad power sword in your hand, meeting his attack head-on. The two azure blades, crackling with disruptive energy fields, clashed violently, sending sparks flying in all directions. Instantly, your other hand raised the bolter, aiming at the space between Asmodai's power armor's chest and abdomen, and you unhesitatingly pulled the trigger. Ah! Reacting just as quickly, Asmodai emitted a frenzied shriek. Relying on his Astartes reflexes, he maneuvered his power armor to dodge, attempting to evade your bolter fire. Boom boom boom. The roar of the bolter echoed once more, explosive rounds narrowly missing Asmodai's ribs, blasting countless cracks into his ceramite steel armor. Just then, you raised a heavy magnetic boot, slamming it into Asmodai's ceramite steel knee, forcing him to kneel heavily onto the ground. And the broad power sword in your hand was quickly raised, crashing down upon his metal helmet. Rookie. Once you've slain a brother, there's no turning back. However, just as everyone around thought Asmodai was doomed. And they were also planning to carry their power swords forward to heavily surround you. The broad power sword in your hand merely slammed its thick blade onto Asmodai's dark green helmet, causing him to let out an incredibly pained roar before falling into complete unconsciousness. Without hesitation, you abandoned the opportunity to continue the kill, your magnetic boot stomping hard against the ground. You, like a common local sand lizard, darted towards the Land Raider Redeemer. Stop that rookie. He's trying to steal a vehicle to escape. The roar of a veteran sergeant echoed around. At this moment, the Dark Angel veteran, who had fought in perfect coordination with you, quickly approached your flank in his power armor. Without hesitation, you swung the broad power sword in your hand, clashing it against the power sword he raised. Get out of the way. Don't force me to start killing. You growled through gritted teeth. Brother, the Dark Angel's Land Raider Redeemer has a tracking system installed. If you try to escape in that thing, we'll catch up to you quickly. Find another vehicle in the hab block. Or just steal a Dark Eldar flyer. You suddenly heard his cautious reminder, as faint as a mosquito's buzz and fleeting. Even the power sword that clashed with yours seemed to loosen its resistance slightly. You sensed his goodwill. You immediately understood and began to shift your feet, gradually changing the direction you faced. And the Dark Angel veteran also subtly cooperated with your movements, launching a series of skillful but harmless, performative attacks. By the time the remaining Dark Angels had also approached your position with their power swords, the Dark Angel veteran suddenly raised his hand, signaling you to kick him. You nodded slightly, then without hesitation, raised a magnetic boot, slamming it into his power armor. The next moment, the Dark Angel veteran, having stomped hard on the ground with both feet, flew backwards. And the direction he deliberately chose was precisely the route the other Dark Angels were planning to take to attack. You immediately seized the brief opportunity he had created for you. You quickly activated your power armor, running towards the depths of the human hab block streets. Boom boom boom. The terrifying roar of the bolter suddenly erupted behind you, but you easily countered it by dodging back and forth. You quickly rushed into the buildings of the human hab block, putting distance between yourself and the pursuers behind you. You took a few deep breaths, adjusting your breathing rhythm. You endured the gradually numbing pain in your injured shoulder and the slight discomfort that was spreading, trying to observe the surrounding environment. The Dark Eldar's human hunting operation was nearing its end. They also seemed puzzled by the sudden and foolish retreat of a group of Astartes, but this only fueled the Dark Eldar's erratic behavior. You once again activated your power armor, quickly stepping over the broken corpses of human civilians. You even saw a pregnant woman whose chest and abdomen had been cut open, along with her unborn child. The Dark Angel's inner circle should be purged. Abandoning the Emperor's ideals and the human empire's system, what's the difference between them and heretical traitors? You subconsciously clenched the broad power sword in your hand, muttering through gritted teeth. Just then, accompanied by a sudden whistling sound cutting through the air, a Dark Eldar piloting a jet bike unexpectedly discovered your location and quickly launched a dive attack in your direction. You swiftly regained your focus. After scanning left and right through your helmet's optics, you immediately activated your power armor, running towards the wall of a building. Instantly, your 2 magnetic boots stepped successively on the wall of the building. Also let your whole person leap into the air like climbing a height. At the same time, the jet bike driven by the Dark Eldar had almost reached you. You gripped the broad power sword in your hand, swooping down towards the Dark Eldar, who was about to counterattack, like a metal giant bird. Your power sword deeply pierced the opponent's black armor, completely shattering the opponent's internal organs. You quickly changed the direction you faced, very thrillingly and excitingly taking over this Eldar jet bike that was about to crash. At this moment, 4 dark angels also chased to the nearby streets. They just happened to see your series of smooth and flowing carjacking actions. You slightly turned the dark green helmet below the white hood. You stared through the optics at the dark angels standing in place, subconsciously raising their power swords. You forcefully raised the Dark Eldar corpse still stuck on the power sword and threw it towards the ground at their feet. Since you are so afraid of the fallen angels, then I will become a fallen angel. From now on, I have nothing to do with the Dark Angels chapter. Next time we meet, Battle Brothers will only cross power swords and face bolters. Thank you all for your support. You gently twisted the throttle of the Eldar jet bike. Without hesitation, you turned the jet bike around and sped away from the Dark Eldar and the Dark Angels. You could almost hear the wails of the human civilians and the renewed roar of bolters from the Dark Angels. Just then, a sandstorm swept over your dark green helmet and white hood, causing your white robe to flutter and rustle. You aimlessly steered the Eldar jet bike deeper into the desolate wasteland. You were completely ignorant of the plans and routes ahead. You had no supplies, nor did you possess a map of this planet. You could only rely on luck to choose a direction and forge ahead. Just then, you faintly noticed a trickle of cold blood flowing from your nostrils and the corners of your mouth inside your helmet. Damn it, how could I forget that Dark Eldar weapons contain a large amount of poison? You subconsciously widened your blurring eyes. You had no choice but to drive the Eldar jet bike to a nearby desolate area surrounded by giant rocks to rest temporarily. You yanked off the dark green metal helmet, revealing that the entire inside was covered in streaks of black, inky poisonous blood. PFF'd. You couldn't help but kneel on one knee, spitting a mouthful of foul-smelling black blood onto the sandy ground. No medical equipment or medicine, and no next step. You desperately propped up your tall, feverish body, leaned against a hidden corner of a giant rock, and muttered to yourself. Forget it, I'll just consider myself unlucky this time. It's taught me the extent of the Dark Angels' First Legion's obsession. If I have the chance in the future, I'll seek justice from their Primarch, the Old Lion. You shook your head slightly. The vision in front of you gradually blurred, and your breathing became increasingly labored. The unknown Eldar toxins in your body were rapidly taking their final effect, disrupting the operation of many superhuman organs. However, at this moment, you seemed to hear a faint sound of footsteps. You mustered the last bit of strength to draw the broad power sword from your waist for a final battle. But your ceramite hand still drooped weakly onto the sandy ground. Recruit, why did you choose to betray the Dark Angels chapter? At that moment, you seemed to hear a cold voice questioning you. Betrayal. I think it's the Dark Angels who betrayed the Primarch and the Emperor, right? What's the difference between their stupid actions and those of heretical traitors? Your consciousness, gradually fading into a blur, muttered unguardedly. Recruit, do you still maintain your loyalty? Or are you planning to abandon the Emperor and humanity because of this? The cold voice continued to ask. Listening to the other party's faint voice, as if coming from the distant horizon, you spoke your last words. I am loyal to the Emperor, and I am also loyal to myself. It's just that this time, I was a little too unlucky. Your consciousness gradually sank into thick darkness. You were suffering from the corrosive destruction of a large amount of Dark Eldar poison. You were on the verge of death. After an unknown amount of time, you suddenly opened your tightly closed eyes. The first thing that came into view was a rough rock ceiling. After a brief moment of confusion, you suddenly got up. You discovered that your dark green power armor had been completely disassembled and neatly placed on a stone platform nearby. Looking down, you realized that you were lying on a bed made of stone. At this moment, a mysterious figure wearing iron-gray power armor and a white leather, red-lined hooded cloak was sitting in front of a stone platform with his back to you, repairing something. At the same time, a large greatsword wrapped in white bandages from top to bottom, revealing only the ancient hilt, leaned against him. Is that the lion's sword? Are you Cypher? You narrowed your eyes slightly and subconsciously whispered. A newly trained recruit of the Dark Angels would not have access to such secret knowledge, nor would they possess combat skills and experience like yours. Who exactly are you? Cypher said slowly, as if he already knew your every move. Did you save me? You took a deep breath, not answering the other party's question. The terrifying poison carefully concocted by the homunculi can naturally only be cured by the homunculi's medicine. You took a panacea that I snatched from Komorig, which not only healed the poison but also gave you extremely powerful physical recovery abilities, Cypher continued, still with his back to you. Just for a Dark Angels recruit, you wasted such a precious life-saving drug. What do you want me to do? Fight against the entire Dark Angels? Your brow furrowed slightly at first, then quickly relaxed. You have now completely become a fallen angel in the eyes of the Dark Angels. As long as you are loyal to the Emperor and humanity, you can do whatever you want, without any orders or regulations. I was just trying it out. After all, no human has ever taken the homunculi's panacea. So far, it seems you have successfully survived the initial painful stage, the other party said to you without any psychological burden. Immediately afterward, Cypher slowly rose from the stone platform, driven by his power armor. He faced you, revealing a stern face as cold as ice and a pair of extremely deep and weary black eyes. Even if I was a guinea pig, I survived. Cypher, I owe you a life, so what exactly do you want me to do? Just say it. Even destructive actions that are very unfavorable to the Imperium of Man, I can help you with once. You narrowed your eyes and stared at the other party, solemnly saying. The reason I saved you is first because of your combat abilities and your disdain for the Dark Angels chapter's fallen ideals, and second because I want you to become the next Cypher. Cypher blinked his deep and weary black eyes and said to you without hesitation. Wait, what did you say? The next Cypher. You couldn't help but widen your eyes, stood up from the stone bed, and looked up at the other party. My life as an Astartes is about to burn out. No life-extending drugs or methods can delay that day. I am too old. Therefore, someone must inherit the difficult duty of Cypher. Cypher took a deep breath and said indifferently. And I have ultimately chosen you. In the second month, you, having fully recovered from your injuries, sat on the edge of the stone bed. With a solemn expression, you listened intently to the lengthy narration of Cypher Lord. Cypher Lord does not simply refer to a name or an Astartes, but rather an ancient title passed down through generations. Its origin lies in the ancient Calibanite Knights, created for the purpose of safeguarding the traditions and secrets of the entire knighthood. Even in the early days of the Great Crusade, before the Primarch, our elder brother Lionel Johnson returned to the Imperium and became the Grand Master of the Knights. This ancient hereditary title had already existed for countless ages. Of course, the Cypher Lord of that time was far from possessing the destructive power of the current, fallen angel. It was more of a strategist, a veteran military advisor maintaining the traditions of the knighthood. When the Primarch Lionel Johnson unified Caliban and became the Grand Master of the Knights, the Cypher Lord personally appointed by him brought this ancient title into the First Legion during the Great Crusade. However, the seeds of chaos that ultimately led to the destruction of the Caliban were also sown during this period. The arrival of the Emperor not only brought advanced technology far exceeding what Caliban had before, but also endless war and suffering. For the sake of more resources and war materials, the black forests of Caliban were completely cleared, and the great beasts were slaughtered to extinction. However, this unbridled environmental destruction also brought corresponding disasters. The black forests and great beasts of Caliban were not entirely useless. Their presence, along with that of the alien race known as the Dark Angels, suppressed the corruption and spread of chaos. Now, however, the doom of Caliban was inevitable, which further fueled the long-standing conflict and strife between the Calibanites and the Terrans. Even Luther, Lionel Johnson's foster father and close friend, the main culprit of the Calibanite rebellion. The reason he was corrupted by chaos was likely closely related to the subconscious resentment of the Calibanites towards the human Imperium. However, you also heard the unfamiliar name of the warp artifact, the Ouroboros, for the first time from the Cipher Lord. This is a powerful and mysterious warp creation with its own consciousness, and even the source of Caliban's chaos corruption is inseparable from it. In the past, the alien race, the Dark Angels, hated the Ouroboros and secretly guarded it, preventing it from being awakened and released. Unfortunately, the existence of the Ouroboros, due to the accumulation of various factors, ultimately led to the destruction of Caliban, the Primarch's slumber, and the most serious division and chaos within the First Legion, the Dark Angels. When Caliban was destroyed, I was one of the Dark Angels sucked into the warp, and I personally killed the previous Cipher Lord, becoming the current Cipher Lord. My name is not important, you only need to know that from now on, your name and past will only have one meaning, and that is Cipher Lord, who bears a difficult mission. The Cipher Lord slowly lifted his white hood, revealing a head of long white hair, and said to you with a solemn tone. You repeatedly mentioned the difficult mission of the Cipher Lord to me, so can you tell me, what is your, or rather, my future mission? You squinted your eyes, gazing at him with a questioning look. I will choose to tell you when I am about to die, but before that, you, a super recruit who is one step away from entering the inner circle of the Dark Angels, still have many things to learn. In the Cipher Lord's deep and weary black eyes, there seemed to be a fleeting hint of tenderness. In the third month, the Cipher Lord took the initiative to arrange your training tasks. You discovered that even after re-equipping the power armor that he had skillfully repaired, you could hardly handle him in a one-on-one situation when he was unarmed. Relying on the powerful physical recovery ability unexpectedly brought by the Bloodling elixir, you played a game of exchanging injuries with the Cipher Lord. You even successfully forced him into a dead corner of the training ground. However, in the next second, as if casting a shadow step, the tall figure of the Cipher Lord suddenly disappeared and silently appeared in front of you, knocking you to the ground with just one punch. While lying on the sandy ground spitting blood, you listened to the Cipher Lord's evaluation of your fighting style. You are good at using the combat environment and the abilities or weapons and equipment you control, and your will and mentality are also good, but sometimes, you are too invested and fanatical in combat, and you often subconsciously ignore some potentially fatal combat changes. Lying on the ground, you muttered a few incoherent words, shook your dizzy head, and gave the Cipher Lord the middle finger. In the fourth month, you could barely last hundreds of rounds under the Cipher Lord's hands before being defeated. The Cipher Lord changed your training plan, adding shooting exercises for you. He personally handed you a plasma pistol surrounded by blue light and a beautifully crafted bolter pistol. Moreover, with a nonchalant tone, he elaborately introduced them to you, showing off that these two ancient pistols, in addition to being precious ancient relics, the plasma pistol also possessed a mysterious property of never overheating. You raised an eyebrow at him expressionlessly, and then, with a blank face, you picked up the plasma pistol that never overheated. Hee, old man, the galaxy is so big, you're not the only one with a plasma pistol that never overheats. You subconsciously gave the Cipher Lord a cheeky smile. At this moment, the Cipher Lord, whose face was expressionless and showed no emotional fluctuations, stared at you deeply. You were forced by him to continuously shoot at the same rock wall crater for 24 hours, and you were not allowed to lower your arms at all. You couldn't temporarily tell whether this was a real shooting training exercise or a small revenge from the Cipher Lord. You ultimately accepted the shooting training arranged by the Cipher Lord. In the fifth month, the Cipher Lord began to teach you how to simply disassemble and repair power armor. At the same time, he also told you all the secrets about the fallen angels. For the Dark Angels, the issue of faction is sometimes more deadly than the issue of loyalty. After all, the composition of the fallen angels is too complicated. Among them are factions that are purely loyal to the Emperor. These are the Astartes who can be summoned and led by the Cipher Lord, and the fallen angels whose information you need to remember at all times. There are also some who disdain the Emperor himself, but are loyal to Lionel Johnson and the Imperium. They can ask for help when necessary, but they must also pay a corresponding price to gather them. The largest number are those fallen angels who disdain the human Imperium and hate Lionel Johnson, and are only loyal to Luther. Sometimes, they are also the best bait to attract the terrifying inner circle of the Dark Angels. If your fishing skills are proficient, you can even guide the crazy Dark Angels to help you accomplish some things. As for those fallen angels who occupy mountains as kings or have joined chaos, kill as many as you can. Keeping them is also a disaster, unless you also plan to use them to fish. Thank you for your support. The story of the Dark Angels is too complicated, I just chose one possibility to write. In general, chaos, corruption, factional struggles, and many other factors worked together to cause the destruction of Caliban, including well-intentioned actions that had bad consequences, such as Azrael, whose reckless actions to save the Primarch instead led to the Primarch's slumber, forming a temporal Ouroboros. In the 6th month, you carefully donned the exquisitely crafted power armor belonging to Cypher the Lord. You gazed at Cypher the Lord before you, who was growing increasingly aged, his towering frame covered in various scars, and fell silent. You were guided by him to a knowledge crown of unknown origin. Cypher the Lord explicitly told you that over thousands of years, he had prepared countless hiding places throughout the galaxy and woven a vast network of relationships. These things could not be completely recorded by memory alone and could only be instilled through the knowledge crown. Together with Cypher the Lord, you connected to the knowledge crown. After activation, a wealth of information regarding hiding places and exploitable relationships or matters was implanted into your brain. You dazedly disconnected from the knowledge crown. With a serene expression, Cypher the Lord then showed you a rhombus-shaped crystal, no larger than the palm of your hand. This crystal, which appears to be an Eldar creation, is actually a black technology relic from the golden age of humanity, a chrono crystal. Its existence allows you to control the flow of time to a certain extent around you. I usually use it in conjunction with my unerring marksmanship to execute a special ability I call bullet time, which has allowed me to escape certain death on several occasions. If there is enough time, it can even completely reverse the damage to a weapon or piece of equipment, which is one of the methods I use to repair scrapped power armor. Of course, this is only its most superficial use. In fact, the chrono crystal contains a small fragment of a pocket universe, which I use to store many things that are difficult to carry, such as flying vehicles, Centurion warsuits, and ammunition supplies. Next, I will also teach you how to use the Eldar webway to traverse the entire galaxy. It is precisely this indescribable and unique experience that has allowed me to truly understand why the Emperor was so obsessed with webway technology. Sadly, in the end, everything fell short. Cypher the Lord, his black eyes deep and weary, couldn't help but sigh. In the 7th month, you, who looked even more like Cypher the Lord in appearance, learned many precious secrets taught by him. Cypher the Lord even taught you how to use alien races to achieve your goals. Among the Eldar, the only ones you can truly trust and cooperate with are the Death Guard, but you must still be careful and cautious. The Craftworld Eldar will only temporarily cooperate when both sides face chaos and other greater threats, but be wary of their betrayals. As for the Dark Eldar, Cypher the Lord suggests that the best option is to kill them on sight. Moreover, many small groups of orc boys can be deceived and extorted, but you should try to stay away from orcs with a warboss. As for the Necrons and Tyranids, Cypher the Lord admits that he has had relatively little contact with them, usually exchanging blades and bolter rounds. However, Cypher the Lord has occasionally encountered a rambling Necron overlord chasing him around. The overlord seems to want to capture him alive. Cypher the Lord's advice is that the overlord is simply no match for him. If you encounter him, it's best to find a way to escape as soon as possible. Finally, Cypher the Lord also said to you earnestly, if you are unfortunately lost in the warp, repeatedly praying to the Emperor is your only salvation. As long as you are loyal to the Emperor and the Imperium of Man, you will receive the necessary guidance. In response, you couldn't help but smile at Cypher the Lord, saying nothing more. In the 8th month, Cypher the Lord's aging seemed to accelerate after removing his power armor. Perhaps it was seeing your rapid growth with the naked eye. In any case, Cypher the Lord became very accepting of the impending death. When your training and knowledge were almost exhausted, Cypher the Lord suddenly came before you, holding the lion's sword, wrapped in layers of bandages. With a solemn expression, you hung 2 ancient firearms on your waist, gazing at the increasingly decaying and crumbling Cypher the Lord before you. You guessed correctly, this is the Primarch Lionel Johnson's weapon, the Lion's Sword. I will not pry into your past secrets, nor do I want to know why you know the origins of these things, but my only request of you is that unless you are about to fulfill the difficult duty of Cypher the Lord, you must never draw this sword. Cypher the Lord said to you in a stiff tone. You nodded without hesitation, swearing to him in the name of the Emperor. Thank you, kid. No, Cypher the Lord, it's time for me to teach you the last lesson. A faint smile seemed to appear on Cypher the Lord's forever impassive face. He solemnly entrusted the Lion's Sword to you. You also slowly knelt on one knee, receiving it with both hands and firmly securing it behind the power pack. Didn't you once ask me what the difficult duty of Cypher the Lord is? In fact, I cannot tell you, but you must kill the previous Cypher the Lord to truly see those fragmented and even blurred memory fragments. I believe the original inheritance of Cypher the Lord was certainly not like this, but since the collapse of Caliban, this ancient title that has been passed down seems to have been cursed by some mysterious existence. When I killed the previous Cypher the Lord, countless memory fragments flooded into my mind. I instantly understood what my duty was, but later, I suspected that perhaps the duties borne by each Cypher the Lord were different. Now, you must completely end my life in order to obtain your duty as Cypher the Lord. The aging Cypher the Lord seemed to gradually regain his vigorous energy. He suddenly widened his eyes and shouted at you in a deep voice. You took a deep breath, your two ceramite hands clenched into metal fists. You did not doubt the truth of his words. In the long process of getting along with him, you gradually felt the warm heart of the old Cypher, wrapped in layers of indifference. What are you hesitating for? Do it. Cypher the Lord, his momentum gradually waning, couldn't help but shout at you. Teacher, may your soul be blessed by the Emperor, may your soul return to the throne. Without hesitation, you raised your ceramite fist, driving the exquisitely crafted power armor, and pounced on the old Cypher, who was smiling with relief. PFF'd. In an instant, just as your ceramite fist forcibly pierced through the old Cypher's decaying and crumbling broad chest. Many fragmented but exceptionally real memory scenes quickly appeared before your eyes. You seemed to become a personal witness to ultimate secrets. You personally saw the Primarch, Lionel Johnson, who was as silent as a lion. You personally saw the instigator Luther and the fallen angel Zahariel, corrupted by the Ouroboros. You personally saw the assassination of the previous Cypher the Lord by the old Cypher, who did not reveal his name. You even saw the Emperor, wearing golden power armor, his face always shrouded in golden light. At this moment, countless chaotic and real memory fragments also gradually combined in your mind into a difficult duty that you could never escape and that belonged only to you. If one day I accidentally fall, you must find a way to awaken me from the darkness, little brother. At this moment, you seemed to hear Lionel Johnson's low voice, without any emotional fluctuations, in your ears. You instantly opened your tightly closed eyes. You couldn't help but utter a murmur of surprise and uncertainty. Could it be that I have already participated in the Caliban heresy? This